disciple of Orochimaru, the evil scientist from Naruto. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 251, Feng Huazayaksu affected by parasites. The queen also needed time to grow, which surprised Kenichi Amemiya. Honestly, he'd been thinking about just having Feng Huazayaksu start experimenting with some small parasites. So, you're saying you can now have a simple conversation with her? Kenichi raised an eyebrow. After just one night, he hadn't expected the queen to have reached this stage. The queen was growing rapidly and seemed to possess considerable intelligence. He didn't know if it was due to Feng Huazayaksu parasitizing her or something else, but it still pleased Kenichi. After all, having a subordinate with some independent thinking skills was far better than a subordinate who simply followed orders. At least, unexpected situations wouldn't cause mission failure. Furthermore, a queen with intelligence would make managing the other smaller parasites much easier. The only problem was that the queen's loyalty to him was a bit too strong, a level that Kenichi Amemiya found a bit uncomfortable, and even Feng Huazayaksu's gaze on him was becoming unsettling. Yes, Master Amemiya. Xiaoyu told me that she needs some time to grow before she can start reproducing other companions. Feng Huazayaksu looked at Amemiya Kenichi enthusiastically, speaking with great respect. That's true. Even if it's a parasite, it's still a living thing, not some alien creature that can grow instantly and become combat ready. Didn't you see that Fasahage next door needs to burrow into another person's body and develop for a while before transforming into its alien form? Amemiya Kenichi wasn't too surprised. After all, it takes time for a living thing to grow from a larva to maturity. Even insects, which can undergo metamorphosis, need time to transform from a caterpillar into a butterfly. Besides, Amemiya Kenichi has other concerns right now. Amemiya Kenichi looked at Feng Huazayaksu before him, his lips twitching. Earlier this morning, Amemiya Kenichi had completed the parasite transplant on Feng Huazayaksu. However, considering her young age and the need for some rest, he went back to sleep. He found Feng Huazayaksu again this morning to inquire about the parasite. Unexpectedly, in just a few hours of sleep, the parasite had grown up and even named itself Xiaoyu, which made Kenichi Amemiya a little bit amused and helpless. The name Xiaoyu sounded related to him, and it was obvious that the mother insect was very loyal and respectful to him. But this was not the point. The point was that Feng Huazayaksu seemed to have been affected. Now Feng Huazayaksu's attitude towards him was even weirder. Before, she was grateful to her benefactor, but now Kenichi Amemiya felt that the other party looked at him as if he were looking at his father, mixed with some attachment. If the time of parasitism gets longer in the future, will it lead to the other party being assimilated by the mother insect more and more? But this is a good thing. At least Kenichi Amemiya does not have to worry about the issue of loyalty. The mother insect and Feng Huazayaksu are completely loyal to him, so in the future, the entire snow country will fall into his hands. Of course, what satisfied Kenichi Amemiya most was that Feng Huazayaksu hadn't noticed this. She still retained a high degree of autonomy, unlike the remake of the game Kenichi played before the time travel, where she lost most of her autonomy after being parasitized. This was a crucial point. Otherwise, if the queen insect had to give orders for everything, it would be quickly discovered, and who knows if a new ninja world war would be triggered. Then there's no need to rush. Just live a normal life. Kenichi Amemiya scratched his head. He had originally thought he could begin research today, but judging by the current situation, he didn't think he would be able to start research on the parasite for a while. When he could, he would return to the snow country and begin his own plan. He didn't want to cause any problems with the queen insect's growth and development because of him. Forcing things to happen was not an option. As for now, Kenichi Amemiya planned to leave the snow country and discuss with his teacher whether Konoha had any unusual plans for the Hyuga clan. If so, there was no guarantee he would be able to obtain a pair of Byakugan. Kenichi Amemiya pondered. He had originally considered obtaining the Hyuga clan's Byakugan through Konoha's third Hokage and Danzo, but considering that the Byakugan among the Hyuga clan varied in rank, Kenichi Amemiya decided to obtain them himself. His target was naturally straightforward, Hinata Hyuga, the noble woman of the purest Hyuga clan bloodline. Kenichi Amemiya didn't intend to gouge out Hinata's eyes. He didn't need to do that. A small amount of tissue scraping would suffice. He could even directly obtain a single cell from Hinata's eye, which would allow Kenichi to extract the necessary information. As for the complete genome, a blood sample wouldn't be difficult. So, in that case, I have to go back to Konoha. Amemiya Kenichi had made up his mind. He had to obtain Hinata's Byakugan. After all, it had been certified by others. No other Hyuga clan member had eyes as good as Hinata's. In a sense, Hinata was a genius. However, this personality trait caused Hinata to miss her prime training period, which later widened the gap between her and Naruto. Having made his decision, Amemiya Kenichi returned to his teacher's residence. Now that the mission in the Snow Country had been completed, and the special metal from the Snow Country had been obtained, it was time to leave. Kenichi, Sanzuamado, what are your plans? Orochimaru sat on the bed, sipping tea and gazing out the window. Amemiya Kenichi's nose twitched, sensing a strange smell in the air. But his teacher's question made him pause. He knew what his teacher meant. He was definitely asking if Sanzuamado should be sent to the Akatsuki organization. Teacher, I think Mr. Santa can join us first, but there is no need for him to join the organization. Kenichi Amemiya was silent for a while, and then gave his opinion. Although Akatsuki is good, it is just a pawn after all, and according to what Kenichi Amemiya plans to do in the future, Akatsuki is too small, and Nagato's ideas also conflict with his. Unless he can convince Nagato and let Nagato and Konan work for him instead. Happy National Day to all readers. I went out to play with my parents yesterday, so I didn't update. Sorry. Chapter 252. There are always people trying to gain a position they don't deserve. Oh. I thought you'd let Sanzuamado join the Akatsuki. The teacher glanced at Amemiya Kenichi with a half smile. He was a bit amused, not knowing when he'd left such a strange impression on his teacher. For Amemiya Kenichi, the Akatsuki was simply a source of research materials and funding. While he hadn't yet profited much from the Akatsuki, Nagato's attitude had at least softened somewhat, making future profits from the Akatsuki possible. Teacher, while Akatsuki has some valuable research, letting Sanzuamado join it might cause unnecessary trouble. Amemiya Kenichi shrugged helplessly. A scientist like Sanzuamado would be a waste in the Akatsuki. Just look at the ninjutsu deflection device he developed, and you can tell he'll end up in a lab, not a mercenary. It's like sending a top scientist to a war-torn region as a mercenary, ruthlessly licking blood. Orochimaru nodded. She thought so too. Someone like Sanzuamado couldn't join the Akatsuki organization. He had to serve under them no matter what. Even Orochimaru would be reluctant to let him go, not to mention his exceptional knowledge. When chatting with Sanzuamado yesterday, Orochimaru had discovered that his scientific research capabilities were indeed exceptional. Besides cloning, he also mastered many other advanced technologies. It could be said that Sanzuamado was one of the few people Orochimaru had ever thought of chatting with all night. The previous person was Kenichi Amemiya. Teacher, can I leave after a while? The Snow Country is still unstable, and I want to stabilize the situation. Kenichi Amemiya rubbed his hands with a smile. Fenghua's Iaxu was so old. If he left now, it was hard to say whether those guys would cause trouble. Fenghua's Iaxu wasn't a concern, but she now had Amemiya Kenichi's mother worm within her, and the mother worm couldn't die. So, Amemiya Kenichi wanted to stay for a while, seeing if any fools dared attack. If so, he'd kill them. If not, it wouldn't be too late to leave. Oh. Fine, then I'll take Sanzuamado back by boat. Your airship isn't suitable for public exposure just yet. Orochimaru gave Amemiya Kenichi a playful look. He could certainly guess his disciple was worried, having witnessed what happened yesterday. And the giant sword made of lightning reminded Orochimaru of the beast with claws emerging from the dark clouds mentioned in the previous Konoha attack report. It seemed his disciple's power was becoming increasingly unfathomable. Unconsciously, Orochimaru felt he had nothing left to teach his disciple. If that was the case, he'd prepare a farewell gift. He thought a genetically programmed ninjutsu with a significantly increased success rate would be a good option. Okay, teacher, I understand. Amemiya Kenichi hurried out. He planned to stay in this place for a month, which should be enough time. However, before that, he had to pretend to have left the snow country. So Amemiya Kenichi and his teacher put on a show. He left the snow country in front of everyone, leaving on a boat. Fenghua Zayatsu was crying on the shore. To keep it secret, Amemiya Kenichi didn't even tell Fenghua Zayatsu. He waited until the boat had sailed away for 3 days before Amemiya Kenichi, sitting on the boat, released his shadow clone. Can't you just let the shadow clone handle this kind of thing? Sanzu Amado was a little curious. Obviously, the shadow clone could handle this kind of thing, so why did the real one handle it himself? My student always has some strange ideas. Orochimaru was not surprised. After all, his disciple had done so many strange things. Back when she was still in Konoha, she once saw her disciple staring blankly at the Hokage rock, which made Orochimaru wonder if her disciple wanted to be a Hokage. After all, only the successive Hokage could be carved on the Hokage rock. Later, it turned out that the disciple was curious whether the statues of the successive Hokage on the Hokage rock were formed by ninjutsu or hand-carved. If they were hand-carved, how much would it cost to carve them once? Orochimaru was so angry that he laughed and sent Amemiya Kenichi to carve the stone on the spot. Fortunately, the disciple quickly realized his mistake and started to do his research honestly. You are a really outstanding student. Sanzu Amado thought of the guy's performance in the previous battle with him and looked at Orochimaru next to him with some envy. But why did he always feel that Orochimaru, one of the 3 ninjas in front of him, was a little feminine? He had heard the legend in the ninja world that Orochimaru was actually a woman. It was so convincing that a book had even been published about it. But Sanzu Amado always thought the Orochimaru he saw was a man, the kind with exceptional luck. After all, to receive a disciple of this caliber was truly remarkable. Sanzu Amado had accepted students before, both genuinely and through missions, but none could compare to Kenichi Amemiya. And this guy wasn't just a skilled fighter, he was also incredibly skilled in scientific research, the perfect disciple. Orochimaru stared intently at the place where Kenichi Amemiya had disappeared. Even she felt intimidated by such a disciple. These idiots. Meanwhile, in the land of snow, Kenichi Amemiya sneered as he looked at the elders of the snow ninja village who had begun probing him. He hadn't expected these idiots to actually start a fight, and they were actually testing the waters step by step. However, Fenghua Zayatsu's performance was far better than Amemiya Kenichi had expected, and she managed to hold on. Coupled with her deception, her bullying tactics, and other maneuvers, Fenghua Zayatsu managed to temporarily stabilize the situation. However, Amemiya Kenichi knew that, if he didn't take action, these guys wouldn't be able to keep up the pretense. I have to wait until the very last moment to strike, and then use lightning fast methods to kill these guys, otherwise they won't be satisfied. Amemiya Kenichi mentally sentenced these idiots to death. Chapter 253 Konoha Riot. There are always some idiots who want to get things they don't deserve. Amemiya Kenichi squinted his eyes and looked at the men in front of him, then wiped his hands. He waited in this snow country for a full month and a half, which made these idiots completely believe that he was not in the snow country and had left. Then these idiots began their stupid plan, forcing the emperor to abdicate. Amemiya Kenichi watched from the side. These idiots also put on a set of ancient forcing the emperor to abdicate, saying things like the young ruler makes the country suspicious. This is a disaster for the destruction of the country and the destiny changes. The artifacts are replaced. This is the law of nature. Hearing this, Amemiya Kenichi was stunned and thought he had traveled to another set. Then Amemiya Kenichi kicked him and couldn't help but say, I have never seen such a shameless person, scaring these idiots who forced the emperor to collapse on the ground, trembling all over. This was rather uninteresting. After all, Amemiya Kenichi had initially thought that these bold individuals seeking to seize the throne of the snow country daimyo might engage in a debate with him, and who knew he could even display the linguistic talent he'd accumulated from watching pornographic videos in his previous life. Unexpectedly, these individuals collapsed at the sight of him, completely timid. Amemiya-sama. Fenghua Zayatsu looked at Amemiya Kenichi with reverence, the admiration and attachment in her eyes becoming increasingly palpable. Amemiya Kenichi glanced at Fenghua Zayatsu with a nagging headache. This girl was truly troublesome. He didn't know what the future held, but having a loyal subordinate was a welcome relief. At least he didn't have to worry about potential backyard disasters. However, how the mother worm would reproduce new parasites was also a problem, and he wasn't sure how long the mother worm's lifespan would last. If the mother worm's lifespan was limited, he would have to constantly breed the next generation, and there was no telling how much further the mother worm's intelligence would increase. How's the growth going? Amemiya Ken glanced at the group of rebels lying on the ground, then yawned and asked casually. The mother insect might not grow that fast, but it's hard to say. After all, this chakra parasite is extinct in this world. Aside from the Six Paths Sage, no one else probably knows about this parasite. Of course, if it grows well, it would be the best option. Then he could use these guys for experiments, to see what kind of abilities the parasites produced by the mother insect possess. It will take some time, Lord Amemiya, Fenghua Zayatsu replied quickly. Amemiya Ken was not too disappointed when he heard this. After all, this was what he had expected. However, since the parasite had not yet grown, he could only send these guys to the west. He thought they should have been mentally prepared. Amemiya Ken looked at them and thought, well, okay, they were not prepared. Many people even wet their pants. Amemiya Kenichi couldn't help but shake his head. As expected, for most humans, death is the greatest fear in the world, especially for those in high positions of power and wealth. Death means nothing. Perhaps he could consider developing an anti-aging injection, then extorting money from the wealthy, much like the medical conglomerates of his past life. But that was too time consuming. It would be better to just go after those idiots and ask them to pay protection money, so Amemiya Kenichi abandoned the idea. Looking at the creatures before him, Amemiya Kenichi decided to kill them. But then he thought of another option, to lock them up and wait for the females to mature before using them for experiments. However, considering the various problems associated with holding them captive, he abandoned the idea. He had already been waiting here for a month and a half. He couldn't wait any longer. So, Amemiya Kenichi simply killed them, gave Fenghua Zayatsu a few words of advice, and then left the snow country under her reluctant gaze. Sitting aboard the airship, Kenichi Amemiya quickly departed from the frigid snow country. As the airship soared, sunlight bathed him. Kenichi Amemiya stretched contentedly, then yawned. Then I'll see. Next, I'll go to Konoha and look for Hinata Hyuga. But do I need to study her eyes? Kenichi Amemiya scratched his head. His research objectives had been vacant for a while. After all, once a research project began, it couldn't be changed, and it took a long time. Therefore, each research project required Kenichi to deliberate for a long time before deciding on the right one. Hinata's Byakugan was a good choice, but Kenichi didn't know what he would gain from studying it and whether it would conflict with his existing 3 Megatama Sharingan. Studying these tissues would generally grant Kenichi these abilities upon completion, but what would the Byakugan and Sharingan combined create? Kenichi Amemiya himself had no idea. Ultimately, the highly purified Byakugan and Sharingan are both genetic throwbacks. If I had genes from Kaguya Satsuki or the Six Paths Sage, then the Byakugan wouldn't matter. Amemiya Kenichi gazed at the white clouds outside the window, lost in thought. He had previously considered studying Hinata Hyuga's highly purified Byakugan, but Hinata hadn't developed the Samsara-Rai, so whether or not the Byakugan could activate the Samsara-Rai remained a question. Furthermore, both the Samsara-Rai and the Rinnegan were inextricably linked to one thing, the Satsuki gene. Possessing these things required the genes of the Satsuki clan. This was why the bloodline theory in the later Naruto films, and indeed in Japanese anime in general, was criticized. After all, the reason these geniuses were so talented wasn't just hard work and talent, but also bloodline. This was absurd. Kaguya Satsuki is definitely no match for her. That person is still sealed, and even if he were released, I wouldn't be able to defeat him. Amemiya Kenichi touched his chin. Kaguya Satsuki was naturally the best choice, but the problem was that the opponent was too strong to defeat. With the 6 Path Sage's body missing, it seemed the only option in the ninja world right now was Black Zetsu. However, Black Zetsu was an emergency creation, and Kenichi Amemiya wasn't particularly interested in using him. After all, Black Zetsu was essentially Kaguya Satsuki's backup when she was about to be sealed. Unable to maintain even a basic human form, he needed to attach himself to another person. Therefore, he wasn't sure if Black Zetsu actually possessed the full Satsuki genes. But Kenichi Amemiya had no other choice. I remember there seemed to be a mysterious organization in the ninja world called Kara. It's connected to the Satsuki clan, Kenichi Amemiya said, looking down at the sea, a bit bored. He remembered something he'd seen while watching videos on his phone. Kara, a brand new organization, appeared in Boruto. While it's hard to explain why this organization wasn't mentioned in Naruto Shippuden, considering Boruto was released later, Kenichi Amemiya didn't care. However, compared to the Akatsuki he was familiar with, he was completely unfamiliar with the Kara organization. After all, after hearing the news that the 7th Hokage, Uzumaki Naruto, had passed away, Amemiya Kenichi had completely lost interest in Boruto. Finally, when the airship arrived in the Land of Fire, Amemiya Kenichi finally decided on his research. He planned to study the fusion of thermobaric bombs and chakra. As for the Byakugan, he planned to handle it himself. Studying the Byakugan might grant him the Byakugan, or perhaps something else. But if Amemiya Kenichi did it himself, he could try to extract Hinata Hyuga's genes and refine his derivation of the Satsuki clan's genes, ultimately completing his own life-level evolution. I can also see little Naruto. Amemiya Kenichi yawned, looking at the lush forest below. He then found a place to hide his airship before leaving the airship and heading towards the Land of Fire. Despite winter, the temperatures in the Land of Fire remained mild. Ninjas like Kenichi Amemiya could even head out in a single layer, unburdened by the risk of catching a cold. Undeterred, he soon arrived at the nearest village to Konoha, a town Jiraiya and Naruto had passed through during their search for Tsunade. However, upon entering the village, Kenichi noticed something was amiss. This once bustling town was now deserted. Even those walking along the streets were hurried, their expressions tinged with fear. "What's going on?" Kenichi asked, bewildered. He didn't remember any subsequent wars in Konoha. After the wars with the Hidden Cloud Village and the Hidden Rock Village, the ninja world entered a period of relative peace and stability. It was in this relatively stable environment that Naruto, despite his lonely and often disliked childhood, grew up happily and healthily into a ninja who dreamed of becoming Hokage. But now, this village looked like Konoha during wartime, and the situation was extremely unfavorable. After all, this place was close to Konoha. If the situation wasn't so unfavorable, such a situation would be impossible. Amemiya Kenichi thought of a possibility. Could it be that this wasn't a conflict between Konoha and the outside world, but rather a conflict within Konoha, affecting such a close area? Amemiya Kenichi touched his face. He had used the transformation technique this time. After all, he hadn't encountered any lucky ones along the way. This didn't seem right. After all, Konoha was full of ninjas on missions. But now, not a single ninja was in sight. Considering the current situation, Amemiya Kenichi felt a 60% chance that something was wrong within Konoha, and the most likely candidate was the Uchiha clan. If that's true, then the story of the ninja world is really... No, hasn't the story of the ninja world changed drastically since I intervened? Amemiya Kenichi thought of Uchiha Shisu, Uchiha Itachi, and Sasuke in the Land of Rice. Now that Itachi could no longer be the executor of the clan's extermination, Sasuke no longer had to bear the pain, and Shisu survived. The future of the ninja world was in shambles. Amemiya Kenichi left the chaotic town and hurried towards Konoha. However, his pace slowed as he passed. The increasing number of alert ninjas filled the air with a sense of panic. Crouching atop a tree, he surveyed Konoha ahead. The once bustling city was now ablaze, and he could easily see the thick smoke rising in the sky. Is something really wrong? Is Uchiha Fugaku so tough? How come I didn't know about this? Amemiya Kenichi was surprised. Konoha had few unstable forces. The most likely candidate was the Uchiha clan, and there was no one else. Furthermore, according to Shizu, Uchiha Fugaku was no simpler person. He seemed to possess the same power as Shizu, meaning he might also possess the Manjaki Sharingan. The only problem was the unknown power of Fugaku's Manjaki. Despite the numerous alert ninja, infiltrating wasn't a problem for Kenichi Amemiya. He soon reached the edge of Konoha and, looking at the massive defensive barrier before him, scratched his head. It was clear that Konoha had invested heavily in the barrier due to their own affairs, perhaps even to an unimaginable degree. However, that wasn't a big deal. It was within Kenichi's expectations. Looks like it's time to figure out how to penetrate it, or else I'll have to brute force my way through it every time, he sighed. He also wanted to charge in like Nagato, but he hadn't done much research on how to break through it, and Konoha had reinforced it, which was a real headache. Kenichi Amemiya placed a hand on the barrier, his chakra gathering. Immediately, he shattered it and rushed in, standing on the rooftop of a Konoha izakaya. However, considering Konoha's current situation, Amemiya Kenichi felt that, even if the Sandaime learned of this, he wouldn't be able to mobilize many ninjas. With a loud boom, Amemiya Kenichi turned in surprise and saw a lavender giant appear in the direction of the Hokage building. Although only half of its body was visible, Amemiya Kenichi recognized its identity. Susanoo. Fugaku possessed the Manjaki Sharingan, but its power had never been described. Chapter 254. When patience is exhausted. Uchiha Fugaku. As the patriarch of the Uchiha clan, the moment he was chosen as the patriarch, he had vowed to protect the Uchiha clan and shoulder the fate of the Uchiha clan. But unfortunately, fate played a joke on him. The proud Uchiha clan, the Uchiha clan, that participated in the establishment of Konoha, is now being ostracized, hated, and even alienated by their own village. When Uchiha Fugaku became the patriarch of the Uchiha clan, and then gained the highest authority in the clan, Uchiha Fugaku sadly discovered a fact. That is, their Uchiha clan is already walking on thin ice. Uchiha Fugaku saw the village's fear of the clan and the Konoha Hokage's fear of the clan. He also saw that the clan was arranged to have a new residence by the village, a location that seemed larger, but was actually far away from the center of Konoha. Uchiha Fugaku wanted to curse, but looking at the family members and young children behind him, he fell silent. He said nothing, only seeking a new status for his family, the Konoha Guard. But behind the seemingly flourishing scene lay a bottomless abyss. The Konoha Guard, once so highly regarded by him, was now being disliked by countless people. This left Uchiha Fugaku somewhat bewildered. Could it be that the second Hokage had created the Konoha Guard just to deal with them? Although the second Hokage Senju Tobirama was somewhat wary of the Uchiha clan, the previous head of the Uchiha clan had once said that he was merely being equally vigilant against any clan within Konoha that posed a threat. Before Uchiha Fugaku could even think, a series of events unfolded. War and rebellion within his family forced him to swallow back the words he had been about to ask. The clan was also torn between doves, hawks, and neutrals. Every clan meeting was an endless battle, exhausting Uchiha Fugaku. But even more distressing was the lack of outstanding members within the clan. Take, for example, someone like him, possessing the Manjaki Sharingan. Once a rare sight, the Uchiha clan had fallen to the point where few could even open it, and even the younger generation considered it a legend. The clan, struggling with a generational gap, ostracized the village that feared them, and fragmented into three factions of members constantly squabbling and strife. Uchiha Fugaku was exhausted, but he could only do his best to maintain the clan's balance. I've done so much, sacrificed so much, but what about the village? Uchiha Fugaku clenched his fists as he examined the mission report before him. Another team of Uchiha ninjas had gone out on a mission, all killed in action, not a single survivor. This was the third wave of Uchiha clan members killed outside the city. None of them survived, and yet another characteristic was that all of them possessed the Sharingan. Uchiha Fugaku lowered his head. Ever since Shizu defected from Konoha with his son and several other clan members, life in Konoha had become increasingly difficult. ANBU and root ninjas were now stationed outside the Uchiha compound at all hours, carrying out what was ostensibly a protection mission, but was in reality a surveillance operation. Internal conflicts within the clan were becoming increasingly intense. The number of clan members seeking to seize the glory of the Uchiha clan from Konoha by force was increasing, while those who supported the doves and neutral factions were also increasingly defecting. More and more Uchiha clan members felt the village's knife was at their throats. As the clan leader, Uchiha Fugaku felt compelled to act, so he stepped forward and traveled to the village to negotiate with the third Hokage. But every time, the answer was, the elders need to organize a study. This matter still needs to be considered. Didn't you say he died in battle? Are you questioning the village? Such evasive rhetoric continued day after day, week after week. Patience wore thin under the constant evasion. Anger grew intensified by the back and forth. When all this combined, it became clear that it was time for a radical change. Fugaku, didn't I tell you? The matter you mentioned needs to wait until the end of the month for the elders meeting. The Sannin glanced at Uchiha Fugaku before him. How many days had it been? Uchiha Fugaku was like a piece of chewing gum, constantly tangled around his feet, irritating him to no end. Sarutobi-sama, the Uchiha clan deeply loves Konoha, but has Konoha ever loved us? Uchiha Fugaku stared intently at Sarutobi Hiruzen before him. He was still the same, putting it off this month, the next month, the next. Was the Sannin's problems going to be passed down to the fifth? Should the next generation solve this problem? But the village's current actions made him feel as though the Uchiha clan might no longer have one. The Sannin paused, holding his pipe. He glanced up at Uchiha Fugaku, whose eyes were filled with undisguised anger, causing him to frown slightly. Fugaku, what do you mean by that? Konoha is everyone's Konoha. Don't say things that are detrimental to us. The Sannin tapped his pipe, a signal to the ANBU guards outside. Sarutobi-sama, I simply want an explanation. Uchiha Fugaku's breathing grew heavier. He stepped forward and slapped the table in front of Sarutobi Hiruzen. Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyes narrowed, and he put down his pipe. He could tell that Uchiha Fugaku meant business. Can we, the Uchiha clan, can we still live safely in this village? Uchiha Fugaku demanded, his voice low and low, suppressing his rage. Sarutobi Hiruzen glanced at Uchiha Fugaku's hand, which was pressed so hard on the table that cracks appeared. Are you doubting the village's investigation? Sarutobi Hiruzen naturally couldn't just admit that the missing members of the Uchiha clan were actually killed by him and Danzo, and sent to Amemiya, Kenichi and Orochimaru for research. After all, he could know about this kind of thing, but he couldn't let other people know about it. At least there couldn't be clear evidence to prove that he did it. As for what Uchiha Fugaku said, that was naturally the evil Uchiha clan trying to provoke disputes within the Konoha clan. Sarutobi Hiruzen was very good at this kind of thing. Looking at the third generation Sarutobi Hiruzen who still refused to admit it, Uchiha Fugaku's heart was full of disappointment. Is this the Konoha founded by their Uchiha ancestors in the Senju clan? Chapter 255, The Hyuga clan in war. Are you planning to betray the village? Uchiha Fugaku. As Amemiya Kenichi leaned closer, he heard the Sannin's shocked and angry voice. He raised an eyebrow, never expecting it to be Uchiha Fugaku. Although he had learned from Shizu that Uchiha Fugaku also possessed the Mangekyou Sharingan, that had been a mere speculation. Now, however, it had been confirmed. He really does have the Mangekyou Sharingan? Could it be inherited from the family bloodline? Amemiya Kenichi smacked his lips as he gazed at the Susanoo. This was truly a rare sight. Uchiha Fugaku. Amemiya Kenichi knew him well. The head of the Uchiha clan, according to his teachers, was a capable yet relatively weak leader. But he never expected that someone with such a strong character like Uchiha Fugaku would be forced to flip a table right next to the Konoha Hokage building. What had the Uchiha clan been through recently? You should know that in the original story, even when faced with his own son coming to exterminate his clan, Uchiha Fugaku showed no special qualities. Instead, he calmly accepted death, a point for which he was criticized. I just wanted to take my people away, Susanoo slashed down. However, Sarutobi Hiruzen was still a Hokage after all, so he naturally possessed the necessary strength and quickly blocked the attack. Meanwhile, Konoha was in chaos, and some might have thought Li Yunlong was attacking the county seat. This is quite interesting. Amemiya Kenichi smiled. He had already caught a glimpse of the old man Danzo, who had now joined the fray. After all, this was the Hokage building, the seat of power in Konoha. If Uchiha Fugaku destroyed it, it would be a real bummer. Amemiya Kenichi shook his head, ignoring the battle behind him, and turned away. Even if Konoha's inner circle got their brains blasted out, it wouldn't matter to him. Moreover, since Uchiha Fugaku had already dropped his disguise of so many years and officially exposed his trump card of the Mangekyou Sharingan, there would probably be no results in the short term, so it would be better to finish his own business first. However, when Kenichi Amemiya found the Hyuga clan's base, he discovered that the Hyuga clan was now under full martial law. After all, the Hyuga clan was also a member of Konoha, so how could they stay out of it? The guards outside had veins in the corners of their eyes, which was proof that they were using their Byakugan at full power. Some had even noticed Kenichi Amemiya's location. The Byakugan's ability is really outrageous. Kenichi Amemiya smacked his lips. The Byakugan's reconnaissance ability was indeed very strong, especially under the gaze of so many Byakugan. It was not easy to hide oneself. However, Black Zetsu's Mayfly Jutsu should be able to resist the Byakugan's detection capabilities. Who are you? Just as Amemiya Kenichi was pondering, the Hyuga clan member who had spotted him began to call out. After all, this guy had been pointing his finger at their Hyuga clan base, which seemed suspicious. I'm just looking for someone, Amemiya Kenichi said with a chuckle. Admittedly, the unrest in Konoha couldn't have come at a worse time. He'd just arrived and already started causing trouble. If it weren't for the Susanoo being unleashed, Amemiya Kenichi might have even suspected this was a conspiracy between the Sannin and the Uchiha clan leader, specifically to capture him. Looking for someone. The Hyuga clan member in front of him was stunned for a moment, but then waved his hand, indicating that it wasn't convenient right now. The Hyuga clan members weren't as aloof and unpopular as the Uchiha clan, so having other ninja friends was normal. Amemiya Kenichi scratched his head. He could have simply left and waited for the situation to subside before retaliating, but that would have taken too much time. So, he sighed and looked up at the Hyuga member before him. All they could see was the three Magatama spinning in his eyes. Before they could react, they were temporarily controlled by Amemiya's Genjutsu. But another guard behind them noticed and sounded the alarm. What a hassle. Can't you just be quiet? Amemiya Kenichi said, feeling frustrated. He wasn't going in to do anything. He just wanted to get a drop of blood from Hinata Hyuga and scrape some eye tissue. But now that they'd been discovered, Amemiya Kenichi had no other choice but to force his way in. What a nice weather today. Amemiya Kenichi glanced up at the clear, cloudless sky, but that didn't matter. As Kenichi Amemiya activated his Sage mode, streaks of lightning filled the corners of his eyes. Then, a thick fog spread and swept forward. Fueled by Kenichi Amemiya's immense chakra, it instantly enveloped the entire Hyuga clan's compound. Simultaneously, a lightning ball appeared in Kenichi Amemiya's right hand. As Kenichi thrust it forward, the entire fog was instantly covered with streaks of lightning. Hyuga Hinata should be alright, right? The fog in the center has been somewhat dissipated. Kenichi Amemiya observed the dense fog and touched his chin. The lightning jutsu he employed this time was quite powerful. After all, nearly every member of the Hyuga clan was a ninja, and even those who weren't were much more physically imposing than others. Using a more conventional jutsu would likely have been difficult to paralyze the majority of the Hyuga clan. And now, the fog had finally dissipated, and the Hyuga clan's speed was remarkable, far superior to that of the Star Ninja village. It was at this moment that Kenichi Amemiya suddenly noticed something attacking from a distance. Although it had no form, he could feel that it contained some kind of chakra, which was directed at his acupuncture points. Kenichi Amemiya instinctively dodged, and at the same time, saw a man with a gloomy face and a team of elite Hyuga clan ninjas walking out. It was he who had just attacked. You are not dead yet. Kenichi Amemiya looked at the man in front of him with some surprise. Of course, he knew who this man was. Hyuga Hisashi. Do you know me? Hyuga Hisashi frowned and looked at the man in front of him. The other party seemed to have used some kind of disguised ninjutsu, and the chakra flow on his body seemed very strange. However, what shocked him the most was the excessive amount of chakra on this person. Is this the chakra that a human can possess? This is simply a human-shaped tailed beast. Chapter 256 The World That Has Not Changed. How could he not recognize him? Amemiya Kenichi looked at Hisashi in front of him with a subtle expression. After all, in his impression, Hisashi's death was a relatively memorable point in Konoha's short history. It also pointed out the difference between the main and branch families of the Hyuga clan, laying the foundation for some foreshadowing. However, Amemiya Kenichi originally thought that Naruto would find a way to solve this problem, but later discovered that Naruto could not solve this problem. He could only prevent his wife Hinata Hisashi from becoming a branch family. Even after the Fourth Shinobi World War, the structure and situation of the ninja world had not changed much. Naruto suppressed that era with his own military power. Unless Naruto died, or a new event occurred, such as the Otsutsuki clan, the structure of the entire ninja world would remain stable for a while. Of course, after Naruto and other powerful people who could dominate the world died, it was hard to say what the ninja world would become. So strictly speaking, even a protagonist like Naruto hasn't fundamentally solved the problems facing the ninja world. Of course, this also has something to do with Kishimoto. After all, in his previous life, such problems were incurable, so Kishimoto naturally couldn't escape them. Of course I know him. He's a branch of the Hyuga clan and a lifelong slave. Kenichi Amemiya said with a chuckle. Although he knew about Hyuga Hisashi's situation, he didn't intend to talk to him much. If he wasn't dead, then he wasn't dead. It was probably because of his appearance that the envoy team sent by the Hidden Cloud village to Konoha became more regular. They were no longer those who wanted to get a Byakugan from Konoha, so the kidnapping of Hinata Hyuga didn't happen, and naturally Hyuga Hisashi didn't need to take the blame. Hearing Kenichi Amemiya's words, Hyuga Hisashi's expression was very unhappy, and the Hyuga clan members behind him were even more furious. However, this was also what Kenichi Amemiya wanted to achieve. No, you're a clone. Hinata Hayashi frowned at the masked figure before him. He quickly sensed something was amiss, but he wasn't entirely sure. After all, he'd never seen a clone with so much chakra before. Shadow clones often had a tendency to be chakra depleted. However, this guy possessed more chakra than an average jonin. If he were a clone, wouldn't we know if we had a fight? Amemiya Kenichi opened his mouth and grasped something with his left hand. A raging flame erupted from his mouth, shooting straight towards the Hyuga clan ahead. Seizing their attention, Amemiya Kenichi pulled out a gadget he'd prepared in the snow country and threw it over the Hyuga clan's heads. As it exploded in the air, countless sparks rained down. What kind of flame is this? It hurts. A ninja from the Hyuga clan accidentally had his arm touched by the flames above his head. Instantly, the flames blazed up on his hand, but even with his water escape technique, he couldn't extinguish the flames on his arm. Soon, all his muscles were burned through, revealing the bones inside. What terrified him even more was that, even though only the bones were burned, the faint flames were still burning, as if they were determined to burn everything clean. Hyuga Hisashi naturally noticed this scene. He loudly commanded his fellow clansmen to use earth escape technique to block the flames falling from their heads. This flame couldn't be extinguished by fire. What kind of ninjutsu is this? This is not ninjutsu, this is science. Amemiya Kenichi yawned, then picked up a shuriken in his hand, playing with it, while looking at the Hyuga clan in front of him who were desperately trying to avoid the white phosphorus bombs. By then, Konoha was in chaos. Shinobi were fighting everywhere, flames shot up into the sky, and Amemiya Kenichi could hear voices shouting, Uchiha clan rebellion. The Hyuga clan's base was a relatively quiet place. The Sandaime, as a sign of his respect for the Hyuga clan and a way to win them over, had given them a quiet spot amidst the bustle, devoid of other large clans nearby. This allowed Amemiya Kenichi to briefly focus on dealing with Hisashi. So, how about trying that railgun the original mentioned? Can lightning release achieve a similar effect? Amemiya Kenichi glanced at the shuriken in his hand. A flash of lightning suddenly surged from his palm, and the shuriken began to tremble. Hisashi was right. It was indeed just a shadow clone. Hisashi Hinata, where are you? At that moment, Amemiya Kenichi was searching the Hyuga clan base for Hinata. After the recent attack, the Hyuga clan's base was now in chaos, littered with injured people and medical ninjas busy trying to save them. Kenichi Amemiya quickly leaped past them, carefully avoiding those with their Byakugan eyes. After performing a combined ninjutsu of mist and lightning, Kenichi Amemiya left behind a shadow clone and slipped in. After all, He hadn't forgotten his purpose this time. He wasn't here to cause trouble for the Uchiha clan, he simply needed to accomplish his plan. Only a fool would engage in a 300-round battle at the gate, attracting Konoha's ninjas, and making it difficult for them to leave. A wiser person like Kenichi Amemiya would naturally choose to enter and take a drop of Hinata Hyuga's blood, then some might issue, to complete his research. But by the time Kenichi Amemiya found Hinata Hyuga, he regretted it. Because Hyuga Hayashi and 3 other teams of ninja were standing there, one of them staring intently at him. The 3 teams beside him were also formidable, likely all Jonin. 3 Jonin teams plus Hyuga Hayashi made for a truly impressive lineup, and even Amemiya Kenichi couldn't help but applaud. As expected of the Hyuga clan, Konoha's premier clan. "Sir, what brings you to my Hyuga clan?" Hyuga Hayashi looked at Amemiya Kenichi calmly. He had begun making arrangements even as the fog descended. To be the head of a clan, Hyuga Hayashi was quite capable. This, of course, was also due to his upbringing. He wasn't like some second-generation rich kids who only cared about drinking, having fun, and squandering the family fortune. Hyuga Hayashi's strength was truly impressive. "I want to take a drop of blood from your daughter, Hyuga Hinata, and then add some Byakugan fragments," Amemiya Kenichi bluntly stated his thoughts. True peace seemed elusive. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 257. One sentence. Let Hyuga Hayashi obey orders. Well, that's what Kenichi Amemiya was planning to do anyway. Even if he didn't say it, wouldn't Hinata Hayashi know what he was going to do later? So, it was better to just say it out loud. Hinata Hayashi was stunned by this. Honestly, even though he'd asked, he hadn't really expected the other party's response. After all, he'd just been asking casually. With such a large-scale move, the other party's plans were bound to be significant. But he hadn't expected the other party to actually want a drop of his daughter's blood and some debris. This puzzled Hinata Hayashi. He'd assumed the other party was after something extraordinary, like the main family's Byakugan. After all, there were many outside of Konoha, and even within Konoha, who coveted the main family's Byakugan. However, due to the Hyuga clan's status and power within Konoha, few could achieve it. The only remaining Byakugan was the one from the Hidden Mist village. But he hadn't expected the man before him to want something so ordinary. It was as absurd as if someone had come to your house, tore down the door, smashed all the tables and chairs, just to get a sip of water. If you had given it yourself, I wouldn't have had to fight you, Amemiya Kenichi added, looking at the stunned Hyuga Hayashi. Frankly, he really didn't want to fight Hyuga Hayashi, because he could sense someone else coming from outside. Amemiya Kenichi had 4 shadow clones left outside. One was dealing with Hyuga Hayashi, while the others were observing Konoha's reaction. Just now, one of the shadow clones disbanded, transmitting its memories back. While Konoha was in chaos, it wasn't neglecting the Hyuga clan. Several teams of ninja were heading there, led by the Nara clan leader, Shikamaru's father. This clearly showed that Konoha still valued the Hyuga clan highly. After all, as a member of the Inoshikacho clan, the Nara clan was already quite powerful. Whether they were worried about the Hyuga becoming like the Uchiha and planning to revolt from Konoha is unclear, but Amemiya Kenichi felt they likely had no such intentions. After all, compared to the Uchiha, the Hyuga were more law-abiding and attentive to the greater good. For example, at the Sandame's request, they allowed Hyuga Hisashi, the clan leader's younger brother, to die. This showed that Hyuga Hayashi had some skill, at least realizing that opposing Konoha would not end well. Nara, Amemiya Kenichi thought, giving him a headache. That old man was a real nuisance, with a high IQ. Getting tangled up with him would be a real nuisance, and there was no telling how long the Uchiha could hold out. Therefore, if they could get what they wanted without fighting, that would be ideal. Hinata Hayashi took a deep breath. Honestly, if Amemiya Kenichi had come in to talk to him privately, he might have considered it. After all, taking a drop of blood or some eye tissue scrapings wasn't a big deal. The Hyuga clan had also had blood drawn during medical checkups. But the problem was, this guy had come to their doorstep and injured so many of their members. If they gave him the money directly, it would inevitably make them uncomfortable. So Hinata Hayashi was struggling with how to handle this matter. At that moment, his expression froze, and he looked up at Amemiya Kenichi in disbelief. Amemiya Kenichi smiled at him, but said nothing. People don't fear death, so why do you scare them with it? Hinata Hayashi took a deep breath and muttered softly. The next moment, he led his clan's ninjas towards Amemiya Kenichi, and a fierce battle was imminent. Under the siege of Hinata Hayashi and the 3 teams of ninja, the intruder was unable to hold his own, and was quickly defeated. However, he had a lucky escape. Looking at the cheering clansmen, Hyuga Hayashi's back slumped considerably. He looked at his protected daughter with a complicated expression, but he still waved and called Hinata to his side. Hinata, are you scared? Hyuga Hayashi asked with a smile, looking at his daughter with a hint of tenderness in his eyes. Hinata's eyes flashed with a hint of weakness, and Hyuga Hayashi sighed. His daughter was far too weak. As a woman, this was a good thing, but as the daughter of the Hyuga clan's head, it was a bad thing. However, Hyuga Hayashi still picked up his daughter and patted her back comfortingly. At the same time, he silently pricked her with a needle, and drew a drop of blood. Looking at the chaotic Konoha outside, and Narashikaku who had hurried over, Hyuga Hayashi's eyes were a little cloudy, but soon returned to normal. After Shikaku left, Hyuga Hayashi ordered his younger brother to lead the Hyuga clan's elite ninjas to quell the rebellion. He then arrived at the woods behind the Hyuga clan, and encountered Amemiya Kenichi, who was sitting on a branch. Did you get what I wanted? Amemiya Kenichi had already removed his mask, revealing his true appearance. I got it, but you must remember what I said. Hyuga Hayashi gave Amemiya Kenichi a deep look, his expression unsettled, but he still handed him the item. Of course I'll remember that. From now on, the Hyuga clan's eyes can never be transplanted into another person. Amemiya Kenichi took it with a smile. It was great to get what he wanted without a fight. With the item now in hand, Amemiya Kenichi had no reason to stay. He said goodbye to Hyuga Hayashi with a smile and left. He planned to see what Naruto was doing, to leave a lasting impression on Naruto, and facilitate his future plans. Hyuga Hayashi, on the other hand, stared at the place where Amemiya Kenichi had left, lost in thought. Originally, Hinata Hayashi hadn't intended to just give up. After all, if they had come knocking on his door and he didn't fight back, it would be detrimental to his reputation. But what Amemiya Kenichi said silenced him, and ultimately convinced him to put on a show and deliver what he wanted. The Uchiha clan has reached this point because of those eyes. Hinata Hayashi sighed deeply, then added Amemiya Kenichi to his list of dangerous individuals. This guy, who had no involvement, had actually caused the rebellion. Chapter 258. Words are also a weapon. Sometimes, achieving one's goals doesn't require complex tactics. Simply grasping the opponent's weak points is enough to achieve one's goal. Take the Hyuga clan, for example. Facing Hyuga Hayashi, Kenichi Amemiya wasn't keen on engaging in direct combat. After all, he knew a fight with Hayashi would be difficult to resolve quickly, not to mention Konoha's reinforcement were on the horizon. While dragging the situation out wouldn't guarantee defeat, it would be cumbersome. So, Kenichi decided to try a different approach. He managed to deliver a single message to Hayashi. It was this simple statement: I'm collaborating with Danzo to enable ordinary ninjas to activate and deactivate the Sharingan. Do you think the Hyuga clan wants to be next? This simple statement saved Kenichi Amemiya from being cornered and trapped, and also allowed him to obtain what he sought. A drop of Hinata Hyuga's blood and a piece of tissue clung to her Byakugan. This was enough for Kenichi Amemiya to conduct his experiments, and he presumably assumed that with this collaboration, it would be much easier to approach Hyuga Hayashi for another cooperation. Kenichi Amemiya also suspected that Hyuga Hayashi would undoubtedly sense Sarutobi Hiruzen's connection. After all, the third Hokage was no fool. I just wonder if the Hyuga clan will clash with Konoha. Kenichi Amemiya yawned, then crouched on Hokage Rock, gazing down at the Konoha village below with a hint of a smile. The venerable ninja village, once the foremost in the ninja world, was now engulfed in war, teeming with ninja battles. Coupled with the Uchiha clan's penchant for fire escape techniques, Konoha seemed bustling with activity, practically ready for a torch festival. But the ultimate outcome of this war still depends on that location, Kenichi Amemiya said, looking towards the Hokage building. It was now gone, leaving only the enraged Susanoo standing there, fumbling to fend off the nearby attacks. That was the main battlefield of the Uchiha chaos. In Amemiya Kenichi's view, the success of the Uchiha clan's rebellion lay largely unrelated to the ordinary ninjas of the clan. The key lay in the outcome of a high-level battle. It wasn't that Kenichi disdained the Uchiha clan, known as Konoha's foremost ninjutsu clan. Rather, compared to the declining Uchiha clan, which had lost a number of its members to Shizu, Konoha was far more powerful. Even without the Uchiha clan, Konoha was still the preeminent ninja village in the ninja world. Furthermore, according to Shizu, the Uchiha clan likely didn't have any other geniuses who had awakened the main Jiki Sharingan. At most, they could only possess a 3 Magatama. If Uchiha Fugaku were to collapse and fall, the remaining Uchiha clan would be powerless, surely facing the unarmed Sarutobi Hiruzen. Clan leader Fugaku looks like he's failing, Amemiya Kenichi said, crouching on Hokage Rock, observing the beleaguered Susanoo, and rubbing his chin. Is Susanoo powerful? He was naturally strong, and his main Jiki Sharingan was also powerful, but Sarutobi Hiruzen wasn't the decrepit old man he would become, so his current strength hadn't declined significantly. After taking a look, Kenichi Amemiya leaped down. He planned to check on Naruto before leaving Konoha. But just as he was about to leave, Kenichi Amemiya noticed something amiss. At the edge of Konoha, he seemed to see someone suddenly jump in. While curious about who had intruded into the battlefield, Kenichi Amemiya had no intention of joining in the fun. Instead, he leaped down from Hokage Rock and found Naruto. Naruto was currently staying at home, with 4 ninjas around to provide security. It was clear that even with the unrest in Konoha, the Sannin still cared deeply about Naruto's safety. Or rather, it was the Kurama within Naruto that mattered most. Amemiya Kenichi shook his head. If he had no one to protect him, he could have stepped forward, but now that he had someone to protect him, it would be best not to go out. Otherwise, getting involved with Naruto wouldn't be a good thing. Amemiya Kenichi personally liked Naruto. After all, aside from Naruto's identity, Naruto's own hard work was also a factor in his success. Of course, this also had something to do with Naruto being the protagonist. I hope brother Fugaku can give Sarutobi Hiruzen a hard time. But if Sarutobi Hiruzen is truly dead now, I'm sure Danzo will be overjoyed, right? Amemiya Kenichi took one last look at the still battling Uchiha Fugaku and Sarutobi Hiruzen, shook his head, and turned to leave Konoha. Konoha's unrest had nothing to do with him. Even if Sarutobi Hiruzen were truly dead, the position of Hokage would likely still belong to Tsunade. The possibility of Danzo becoming Hokage was extremely low. This flame is truly formidable. Meanwhile, at the former Hokage building, Sarutobi Hiruzen gazed upon the Susanoo before him, letting out a long sigh. Then, with some trepidation, he glanced at the scroll beneath his feet. He had nearly been burned by this ominous black flame, which burned incessantly, seemingly forever. Even ordinary water and earth escape techniques couldn't extinguish it. However, even for the ninja professor, Sarutobi Hiruzen knew a solution. For example, the fire sealing seals he had learned could successfully extinguish this strange flame. Sarutobi, don't be soft-hearted. Danzo unleashed a vacuum ball, angrily shouting to boost his reputation, before charging forward again with bloodshot eyes. This was the main Jiki Sharingan. If he could have it transplanted to him, wouldn't the next generation of Hokage be in his grasp? Alas. Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed, and then directly used the compound ninjutsu Tsuchiai Enri, combined with other ninjutsu, that besieged the clan leader, which made Uchiha Fugaku a little overwhelmed for a while. Although Susanoo is an offensive and defensive ninjutsu, it is not impossible to break it. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at the Susanoo in front of him, and he was eager to try. When he was studying with his teacher, he learned a lot of ninjutsu, including the ninjutsu that his teacher taught him to deal with Susanoo. But the teacher also said that this ninjutsu can only be used against incomplete Susanoo. If it is already a complete Susanoo, then this ninjutsu is useless. Now seems to be the time to use it. Chapter 259 The Real Plan. 5 releases. Uchiha Fugaku gasped, looking anxiously at Sarutobi Hiruzen surrounding him, and their hand seals, a wry smile forming on his face. Ultimately, it was all coming to an end. Susanoo was powerful, incredibly powerful, both offensive and defensive, but it wasn't indestructible. Add to that the siege from so many Konoha clans, and Uchiha Fugaku wasn't sure he could withstand Sarutobi Hiruzen's onslaught. The opponent was the Sandaime Hokage, the man revered as the ninja hero, the ninja doctor, the professor. Uchiha Fugaku had once admired Sarutobi Hiruzen because, while his will of fire was somewhat spurious, it had indeed established a bright future for the village. This time, they probably couldn't hold out. But he had bought enough time. Enough time for the Uchiha clan to leave. Before embarking on his plan, Uchiha Fugaku had quietly gathered some of the more dovish Uchiha clan members and explained what would happen today. Uchiha Fugaku knew full well that his beloved clan was riven with division. Those hardline members, those who wanted to restore the Uchiha clan's glory from Konoha's clutches, would certainly not agree to such a disgraceful escape. They would undoubtedly rise up and wreak havoc on Konoha. But would they win? Uchiha Fugaku never expected victory. Konoha was so large, and how many ninjas did it have? What about the Uchiha clan? The Uchiha clan was no longer the same as it once was, when the Mangekyou Sharingan could be freely activated, and even internal clan conflicts involved many members of the clan. The current Uchiha clan was already struggling enough to deal with the ANBU and the Root, not to mention the other major clans that would undoubtedly intervene and wreak havoc on them. Therefore, Uchiha Fugaku never expected to truly restore the so-called Uchiha glory. His goal from the beginning was to cover for his clan's departure from Konoha. As for those stubborn clansmen, let them see what Konoha truly is. See why, even without the Uchiha clan's help, Konoha remains the foremost ninja power. They can also make a final contribution, a contribution to those who have fled, and a contribution to the continuation of the clan's legacy. But it's enough, just this little while. Uchiha Fugaku withstood the attack of the 5-shot volley, unleashing his Susanoo at the last second. Using the explosive force of Sarutobi Hiruzen's 5-shot volley, he rushed back. What is this guy trying to do? Sarutobi Hiruzen sensed something was amiss. The Susanoo didn't look like it would be destroyed by his 5-shot volley. But as he approached, he saw black flames ignite at the Uchiha clan's base, burning ominously. Uchiha Fugaku lay on the ground, his eyes bleeding, but he still let out a hearty laugh. Uchiha Fugaku exhausted all his energy, squeezing his eye power almost madly. He could no longer see, but he felt refreshed. Sarutobi Hiruzen, no, Danzo must be looking very unhappy right now, right? It's a pity for Mikoto, not being able to spend the rest of her life with her, but as the clan leader, he must die. Otherwise how can he hold back the Sandaime and the others? Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at the powerless Uchiha Fugaku, then at the flames ahead. The black flames were so lethal that he had no choice but to send out the sealing squad and other ninjas to seal the terrifying flames. Fortunately, with Fugaku's defeat, it was only a matter of time before the other Uchiha clan rebels were apprehended. This guy, is his goal to cover the escape of the other Uchiha clan traitors? Danzo came over with a cold face. He had already learned about the situation there from the Root. The Uchiha clan split into two factions. One, upon witnessing their clan leader's display of divine might, fled, while the other gathered their belongings, hit, and later broke Konoha's seal, hastily fleeing. The ANBU and Root ninjas who were watching were drawn to the fleeing Uchiha. When they tried to pursue, they were blocked by the black flames. Yes, we've been tricked, Sarutobi Hiruzen said, though his expression wasn't overly grim. He crouched down and glanced at Uchiha Fugaku. Though his eyes were open, his pupils were unfocused and sluggish. They were useless. Sarutobi Hiruzen frowned slightly. He thought of Amemiya Kenichi's eyes and the news Orochimaru's unfilial disciple had relayed. Their research on the Sharingan had yielded a breakthrough, which was why he had acquiesced to Danzo's oppression of the Uchiha. His goal was to obtain a pair of Sharingans for himself, ones that could be opened and closed freely without affecting his power. The moment Sarutobi Hiruzen saw Uchiha Fugaku open his Mangekyou Sharingan, he was stunned, then filled with shock and anger, then delight. He wanted those eyes. If he had them, he'd be much more adept at battling the cage of other villages. Could Konoha achieve renewed glory under his own hands? But now they were gone. Uchiha Fugaku, that idiot, had rudely used his eyes, destroying the Manjaki Sharingan. TSK. The Uchiha were truly a rotten bone, stubborn and unyielding, unable to gain any advantage. But looking at Danzo, who looked sullen beside him, Sarutobi Hiruzen smiled again. Danzo's displeasure pleased him. This old man wanted those eyes even more than he did. Otherwise, why had he planned to raid the Uchiha clan's compound, only to turn back upon seeing Susanoo, like a dog at a bone? Furthermore, this guy had previously claimed that the Uchiha clan was under his control, yet he'd unexpectedly reversed course so quickly. At this meeting, Sarutobi Hiruzen would definitely teach his old friend a lesson. The roots of Konoha, then be good roots. Don't think about getting out of the soil to see the sun all day long. Wouldn't it be better to just rot and die in the soil? Live an ordinary life, die an ordinary death. As for Uchiha Fugaku lying on the ground with a hearty smile, no one cares. The only use of this guy is to have his eyes gouged out, then tortured for information, and finally publicly executed to calm the anger of the village. The village suffered such heavy losses, the Uchiha clan's residence and wealth also need to be confiscated. This is really interesting. In the chaotic Konoha, no one noticed that a masked man was also watching this farce. Chapter 260 Genetic Programming Ninjutsu version 20. The Uchiha clan of Konoha rebelled. When Kenichi Amemiya returned, the teacher looked at Kenichi Amemiya with interest and asked, looking at something while asking. Kenichi Amemiya told the teacher what happened in Konoha. The Uchiha clan's rebellion caused some turmoil in Konoha, but that was all. Because the strongest fighting force, Uchiha Fugaku, was restrained by the Sandaemon Danzo, the damage suffered by Konoha was not great. However, the specific news had not yet been leaked. After all, it took Kenichi Amemiya only one day to return to the land of rice. Such a short time was not enough for those information dealers to spread the news to the entire ninja world. Konoha's affairs could definitely not be concealed. After all, a large ninja village like Konoha must have hidden many spies. The only difference was how Konoha would say it. In any case, Uchiha Fugaku's ending would definitely not be good. This is truly fascinating. I never thought those Uchiha, so docile as lambs, would actually rebel. Orochimaru shook his head and tossed a scroll to Kenichi Amemiya, who took it bewilderedly. Glancing down, he saw the words Gene Complete Ninjutsu 2.0 written on it. Kenichi was stunned for a moment, then glanced blankly up at his teacher, who was reading something. Was this a gift from his teacher? Kenichi realized it instantly, but wasn't this gift a little too precious? Kenichi Amemiya had researched genetic programming himself, but precisely because of that, he knew just how difficult it was to genetically program an adult. It was a formidable challenge even in his previous life. If he could solve it, it wouldn't be surprising to win a Nobel Prize. After all, the number of cells in a normal adult's body is enormous. To genetically program an adult would require programming every cell in their entire body, a task of considerable difficulty. But he didn't expect his teacher to improve it. And hadn't he previously conducted research on genetic programming? How did he pull it out all of a sudden? It's only been a month and a half, less than 2 months. Isn't that a bit too efficient? I spoke with Sanzu Amada earlier. He's also doing some research on genetic programming, Orochimaru said, seemingly sensing his students in a confusion as he fiddled with the object in his hand. Amemiya Kenichi nodded in understanding. If it was Sanzu Amado, then it wouldn't be surprising. After all, he was very knowledgeable about cloning technology, and it wasn't surprising that he'd also studied genetics. So, sensei, what's the success rate of this ninjutsu now? Amemiya Kenichi asked curiously. If the success rate was high, he could try to give the test subject genes similar to Sasuke's. Then, he could see if he could stimulate his emotions to evolve the Sharingan into the Manjaki Sharingan. If so, Amemiya Kenichi planned to program his own genes, thereby achieving a life-level transformation and acquiring genes similar to those of the Tatsuki clan. As for whether there were even better genes above the Tatsuki, that was a question he could only consider once he left the ninja world. I did an experiment, and out of 10 test subjects, 2 survived, Orochimaru said simply. The corners of Amemiya Kenichi's mouth twitched. A 20% success rate. Admittedly, while that success rate was a bit higher, it was still very low, so low that Amemiya Kenichi himself didn't dare try it on himself. But to have achieved this level of success in just 2 months was quite impressive. It still needed some refinement. Curious, Amemiya Kenichi leaned over to see what his teacher was doing. He saw something resembling a surveillance camera, and within it, he spotted a familiar figure, Hidden. Hidden's head was currently submerged in nutrient solution, and his body was also securely stored. The only problem was that his torso was missing. Teacher, where's Hidden's torso? Amemiya Kenichi asked curiously. After all, Hidden had previously been separated into several sections and stored separately, but now the torso was missing. Sanzu Amado was curious about Hidden's immortality, so he took a copy to study. The teacher answered Amemiya Kenichi's question directly. He understood. After all, Hidden's body was truly unique. He couldn't die, no matter what. This suddenly struck Amemiya Kenichi. Since Hidden's body possessed this unique immortality, could he try to genetically program Hidden, and then use Hidden's body for improvement? However, Amemiya Kenichi himself wasn't sure if Hidden's body would undergo any special changes after being genetically programmed. After all, Amemiya Kenichi himself wasn't entirely sure. But overall, it was still a possibility. After discussing this with the teacher, Amemiya Kenichi took Hidden's right hand and left the teacher's lab, intending to return to his own lab to test his idea. But just as he'd walked a little further, he saw a strange creature crawling past him. What is this? Amemiya Kenichi looked at the forest with a strange expression. Then, he saw the strange creature he had just seen crawl out of the forest again and stand before him. It was a white scorpion, but enormous. Its claws were as big as Amemiya Kenichi's body, and its tail hook looked terrifying. However, this scorpion looked very different from ordinary scorpions, with obvious weld marks on its metal. Amemiya-senpai? A familiar voice called out, and then Amemiya Kenichi saw the scorpion waving at him excitedly. Deidara. Amemiya Kenichi recognized the voice's owner. After all, only Deidara could call him senpai. But what about this giant scorpion? Did Deidara make it himself? That shouldn't be the case. Didn't that unfortunate kid love to play with explosions? Thinking of this, Amemiya Kenichi silently took a step back. Yes, how could he have forgotten that Deidara's favorite art form was explosions? Chapter 261 War Scorpion. Fortunately, the giant scorpion before him showed no signs of exploding. On the contrary, it remained remarkably stable. However, considering Scorpion and Deidara's impressive record, Amemiya Kenichi decided to stay away from the giant scorpion, fearing it would leave him with a black mark on his face. Amemiya-senpai, do you have a moment? Scorpion-senpai has invented something very interesting. Please come and see it, Deidara asked excitedly. He seemed to be away from the giant scorpion, and Amemiya Kenichi noticed something resembling a loudspeaker attached to it. It seemed that Scorpion and Deidara had come up with some truly bizarre contraptions while he was away. They even had a camera that could allow for remote communication and viewing. The scorpion before him seemed to lack any ninja element, instead looking very much like a product of technology. Amemiya Kenichi inexplicably felt like he was back in the day. He nodded at Deidara's words. He hadn't seen Scorpion in a while, and now he had no idea what he was up to. Since he was back, he thought it would be a good idea to check it out, otherwise it would be very troublesome. So, Amemiya Kenichi followed the giant scorpion to Deidara and Sasori's laboratory. After not seeing them for a while, Deidara and Sasori's lab looked a bit more formal. However, the lab was littered with remnants of the explosion, suggesting what Deidara and Sasori had been up to while he was gone. Amemiya-senpai. As Amemiya Kenichi reached the lab door, it opened and Deidara excitedly emerged, holding something resembling a remote control. Amemiya Kenichi glanced at the remote, then at the giant scorpion behind him. Something strange struck him. Could it be that Deidara had just used this remote to control the giant scorpion's movements? Why did he suddenly feel like he was encountering a robot player? Did you and Sasori make this scorpion? Amemiya Kenichi looked at Deidara. After all this time, Deidara didn't seem to have changed much. That was understandable, considering he hadn't been away that long, but it wasn't entirely the same. Deidara now had a zoom-like device in his left eye, which was a bit strange. Well, Sasori-senpai and I made this together. And the circle around the outside is the explosive clay I made, but it's an improved version, and now it can even fire. Deidara looked excited, pulling Amemiya Kenichi to talk for a while. Amemiya Kenichi listened intently, eager to see what Sasori and Deidara would create. However, after hearing this, Amemiya Kenichi's expression became a little strange. After all, what Sasori and Deidara were doing was really confusing. Originally, Amemiya Kenichi had thought Sasori would prioritize Unit 01, but he hadn't expected the first thing to be completed would be this gigantic war machine, a dreamlike feeling that had returned to Orochimaru. So what about Unit 01? Amemiya Kenichi asked, looking at Deidara. Deidara gave a nervous smile and said nothing, motioning for Amemiya Kenichi to follow him inside. Amemiya Kenichi raised an eyebrow, but without saying anything, he followed Deidara inside. After entering, Kenichi Amemiya realized that the door to the laboratory was actually silver white, but the outside had been bombed black. He was at a loss for words. Kenichi, are you back? Not long after entering, Kenichi Amemiya saw Scorpion, but Scorpion was fiddling with something. Upon seeing Kenichi Amemiya, Scorpion happily greeted Kenichi Amemiya. Your Unit 01, huh? Kenichi Amemiya had originally planned to chat with Scorpion about Unit 01, but before he could open his mouth, he saw what Scorpion was fiddling with. It looked like a small Unit 01, about 2 meters tall, which was quite compact for a robot. This made Kenichi Amemiya curious about what Scorpion was doing, and why he chose to give up Unit 01 for this one. Scorpion, aren't you going to work on your Unit 01 anymore? Kenichi Amemiya asked curiously. I'm working on it. I just found that the oversized Unit 01 was difficult to control, so I came up with this idea. Scorpion briefly explained his design, and Kenichi Amemiya understood. Scorpion had a lot of ideas. While the idea was a bit quirky, it seemed quite feasible. Scorpion had previously discovered a problem when designing Unit 01. Its sheer size required numerous puppet strings to control it. After all, while Unit 01 looked like a robot, it was actually just an enlarged puppet. The sheer number of puppet strings made it difficult to control. So, after some hesitation, Scorpion simply decided to create a larger puppet, then control it from that. Wouldn't that make things even more complicated? Kenichi Amemiya wondered. Wouldn't this make the process even more complicated? After all, he'd been controlling the larger one directly before, and now he had to use the smaller one. No, that war machine Scorpion just mentioned was just a prototype. Scorpion shook his head, still confident in his idea. Kenichi Amemiya glanced at Deidara, who was playing with something resembling a controller, then at Sasori. Suddenly, he seemed to understand what Sasori meant. Sasori was actually talking about using a remote control to control a large robot. It wasn't a bad idea, but it felt a bit awkward. However, considering Sasori had already successfully attempted it once, he didn't say anything. As for Sasori's question, Kenichi Amemiya decided that, since Sasori had already made up his mind, he might as well just watch. After chatting with Sasori some more, Kenichi Amemiya left. It wasn't that he didn't want to talk to Sasori anymore, but Sasori wanted to continue his research, so he let Kenichi Amemiya go. Kenichi Amemiya had no objection to this. He'd done the same thing in his previous research. So, now we are going to use Hidden's hand to conduct an experiment and see if we can improve on the genetic programming that the teacher has developed. Only if there's a 100% chance of success will I use it on myself. Kenichi Amemiya took Hidden's hand and returned to his lab. Chapter 262. Thank you for your sacrifice and contribution to science. Hidden's immortality is quite remarkable, to a certain extent. Even after being cut into pieces, Hidden remains alive and well. Even when held, the arm displays some nerve activity, even twitching occasionally when stimulated by electricity, which is even more intriguing. It's practically indistinguishable from a normal human arm, aside from the fact that it's detached from the torso. What's even more astonishing to Kenichi Amemiya is that Hidden's hand maintains its original shape after being subjected to both fire and electricity. Even after Kenichi Amemiya's great fire extinguishing attack reduced the arm to charcoal, its recovery speed in the nutrient solution is astonishing. No, rather than immortality, it's more like a rapid regeneration similar to Wolverine's. Otherwise, there's no reason Hiden could withstand Kakuzu's ninjutsu, Kenichi Amemiya observed, a new perspective emerging. After all, the immortal duo's most famous fighting method is for Hiden to entangle his opponent, while Kakuzu looks for an opportunity to attack Hiden together. Those unfamiliar with Hiden and Kakuzu would easily be vulnerable to this tactic, as a normal ninja wouldn't expect someone to attack their own comrades, making it difficult to defend against it. Hiden, after enduring countless attacks, remained able to maintain his composure, demonstrating his incredible self-recovery abilities. Otherwise, he would have been charred beyond recognition. Kakuzu's head-scratching technique wasn't a simple ninjutsu to be easily defended against. However, now wasn't the time for such research. After inspecting the hybrid rice research, Kenichi Amemiya devoted himself entirely to researching and improving genetically programmed ninjutsu. He had already defined his research objectives. Current research target, chakra explosives, research progress. 3.99%. Kenichi Amemiya chose to research a method to fuse chakra and explosives. After all, this thing is incredibly expensive. Kenichi has already invested over 200 million yen in it, with no success at all. His only success was the god-slaying bomb, but it's unclear whether Obito was able to trigger it. Kenichi Amemiya also discovered that research on this chakra explosive was progressing quite rapidly, at least in stark contrast to the other two types. As for Hinata Hyuga's genes, Kenichi Amemiya had his shadow clone analyze them. Once they were isolated, they would compare them to the genes of ordinary Hyuga clan members to determine if Hinata also exhibited a similar atavism. If so, it would prove Kenichi Amemiya's theory correct. Compared to ordinary ninja, only those with bloodlines closer to the Tsutsuki clan had the potential to become even stronger. The only difference was whether they could develop this talent. If I weren't worried about the impact of studying the Byakugan on my Sharingan, I would have just studied Hinata's eyes. Amemiya Kenichi sighed and dropped the twisted arm back into the nutrient solution. He had been trying to refine this genetically engineered ninjutsu for almost a month, but hadn't made much progress. Hiden's arm kept breaking down after the genetic modification. Whenever it broke down, the flesh twisted and turned into something resembling a strange alien creature. However, a 20% success rate wasn't a problem. Now, Amemiya Kenichi had successfully grown a nose on Hiden's hand. Yes, a nose. He tried, but the thing couldn't breathe. Its nostrils were filled with flesh, with no airways. Apparently, the airways hadn't grown with it. Amemiya Kenichi silently labeled the genome inserted by the genetic programming as a nose. While he couldn't be completely certain that these genomes were actually responsible for noses, at least that was the best he could gather. However, the question of how to remove the nose's genetic information became a major headache for Kenichi Amemiya. While Hiden's body, due to its immortality, was ideal for experiments and posed no humanitarian crisis, his body couldn't feel pain. His brain still resting in his teacher's care, making it impossible for him to feel anything. The problem was that after the genetic programming was successful, the genes in Hiden's hand had been completely altered, with an additional set of genes. These genes also successfully gave Hiden's arm a nose. This was peculiar. It felt like the code was identical to Shoyama's, yet it just worked perfectly, a truly baffling experience. So now I have to figure out how to remove the inserted genes? Kenichi Amemiya felt a little devastated. Fortunately, this problem was quite easy to solve. After all, Kenichi Amemiya was very familiar with the inserted genetic information. While removing it was difficult, he could simply destroy it. As for whether destroying Hiden's arm would be destroyed along with it, that wasn't a concern for Kenichi Amemiya. If even this couldn't be endured, then Hiden's immortality still had significant limitations. So, Amemiya Kenichi tried using Yang attribute chakra to destroy the inserted genes, but he quickly discovered that this was unlikely to work. Yang attribute chakra primarily promoted integration and stabilized the genes. Could it be that Yin attribute chakra be used? An idea occurred to Amemiya Kenichi. Every ninja possessed both Yin and Yang attribute chakras, with only a small difference between them. However, that didn't mean every ninja could cultivate yin yang release. Most ninjas used yang attribute chakra for healing and jutsu. Yin attribute chakra had similar effects, but Amemiya Kenichi knew that these two seemingly ordinary chakras were actually extremely powerful, though most people couldn't use them. Then let's try it. Yin attribute chakra did have some destructive effects in the tests. Amemiya Kenichi licked his lips and began experimenting with yin attribute chakra to perform the genetic programming jutsu, aiming to directly obliterate the nose. Upon attempting this, Amemiya Kenichi noticed something amiss. Chapter 263, Accident and News from the Hidden Mist Village. What's going on? Amemiya Kenichi stared blankly at the test bench before him. It was completely empty. Just now, Amemiya Kenichi had attempted to use yin attribute chakra to perform a genetic programming jutsu, hoping to erase the newly inserted nose gene. Unexpectedly, after performing the jutsu, Amemiya Kenichi felt a sense of hollowing out. This was extremely strange, considering Amemiya Kenichi's chakra reserves. After inheriting the sage's physique from the first generation, he had rarely felt this draining sensation, almost never. He could use a large number of shadow clones, a jutsu that consumed a significant amount of chakra. Without sufficient chakra, it would be impossible to create so many shadow clones. But now, feeling drained, Amemiya Kenichi was baffled. So, he simply drained all his yin attribute chakra. Even then, it felt insufficient, but suddenly, it was sufficient. Before Amemiya Kenichi could figure out why this yin attribute chakra had suddenly become sufficient, he discovered a new problem. Right before his eyes, Hiden's arm simply vanished into nothingness. Nothing remained, not even a trace of blood. This left Kenichi Amemiya somewhat bewildered. He tried to touch Hiden's hand, but felt nothing. He even activated his Sharingan, but still couldn't find any trace of it on the test bench, or in the surrounding area. It was as if Hiden's hand had suddenly vanished from the world. This was a bit off. In theory, even a raging fire would leave behind ashes. Burning to the point where no trace of body tissue could be found was extremely demanding, and ordinary fire escape techniques couldn't achieve this. Moreover, if it was a ninjutsu like fire escape technique, there should also be a process of light and heat generation. However, the scene just now felt to Kenichi Amemiya like Thanos snapping his fingers. With a snap of his fingers, Hiden's arm was reduced to ashes, leaving nothing behind. Amemiya Kenichi suddenly felt a surge of fatigue. He swayed, then sat down in a chair. After a moment's rest, he realized that he had unknowingly dismissed all of his shadow clones. Originally, these clones wouldn't have been a burden to Amemiya Kenichi, but some of them had existed for a long time, constantly conducting experiments and caring for crops, so they accumulated a lot of fatigue. So, I suddenly didn't feel the chakra shortage anymore. Is it because I dismissed all the clones? Amemiya Kenichi pinched his brow. But when he thought about what his clones had been doing, Amemiya Kenichi felt a tingling sensation on his scalp. He no longer cared about studying Hiden's body and rushed out, heading straight for where the clones had been. A shadow clone had just been conducting an experiment fusing thermobaric explosives with chakra. It was halfway through, but then, fatally, the sudden retraction of its body caused a problem with the clone's chakra injection. Before Amemiya Kenichi could even push open the door, a violent explosion erupted from within, sending the alloy door bulging. Amemiya Kenichi's mouth twitched, and he rubbed his face in pain. It was truly a loss of both the master and the troops. Not only had the genetic erasure not been completed, but his own explosion-proof laboratory had also been blown up. Amemiya Kenichi could only pray that the situation inside wasn't too dire, otherwise he would have been overwhelmed. Fortunately, the explosion-proof laboratory was very secure, and the amount of explosives was minimal, so the damage was minimal. After dealing with this, Amemiya Kenichi created several more shadow clones to take over the previous tasks. He then returned to the laboratory, intent on determining what he had done to cause Hiden's arm to disappear, and what exactly this force was. You made his arm disappear. When Amemiya Kenichi went to find his teacher, he saw her looking at him in astonishment. But that wasn't the point. The main point was that she had maintained her original Orochimaru appearance. This struck Amemiya Kenichi as a bit strange, but when he saw her carrying something and preparing to leave, it didn't surprise him anymore. She always looked like this when she went out, seemingly only maintaining her appearance when she was with him. Yes, teacher, Hiden's hand is gone. Amemiya Kenichi sighed. He had just tried to extract some biological information about Hiden in the lab, but found nothing. Hiden's arm had been erased, like code on a computer. This made Amemiya Kenichi wonder if he had suddenly mastered some kind of yin-yang release power. After all, in his mind, only powers like yin-yang release could do that. However, after trying it, Amemiya Kenichi realized that he still hadn't mastered yin-yang release. His yin and yang chakra remained unchanged. Then go get his other hand, but be careful this time. Don't lose it. Orochimaru didn't seem too concerned. She had already completed her research on Hiden. Now it was just a matter of measuring his spirit and brain. The brain was all that mattered. The hand wasn't, since Hiden wouldn't have much use for it anyway. Teacher, are you going out on a mission? Amemiya Kenichi asked, looking at the teacher. After all, the teacher rarely left the house, spending most of his time conducting experiments, and it seemed he hadn't been out on many missions lately. No, something interesting seems to be happening in the Hidden Mist village. I'm going to check it out. The teacher smiled, licking his lips, his eyes glittering with excitement. The mention of the Hidden Mist village intensified Amemiya Kenichi's curiosity. He knew the Hidden Mist village. Wasn't it the village where Obito controlled the cage? It had to be said that the Mizukage of the Hidden Mist village was truly miserable. It was quite rare for a cage to be controlled and used as a puppet. But Amemiya Kenichi was even more curious about what the teacher was talking about. Could it be that Obito was blown up by his own god-slaying bomb? Thinking of this, Kenichi Amemiya got a little excited. If Obito was really blown up, then was he dead? If he was dead, that would be really interesting. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 264. Spring and autumn come, and a year passes. Although Kenichi Amemiya had longed to join his teacher in the Hidden Mist village, primarily to see if Obito was still alive, he abandoned the idea after considering how he had accidentally dislocated Hiden's arm. After all, it was more meaningful to stay in the lab and refine his experiments than to join the commotion in the Hidden Mist village, where the situation was uncertain. So, Kenichi Amemiya ultimately chose not to go with his teacher. It seems that after the body was separated, the nerves couldn't connect, and the pain couldn't be transmitted. Otherwise, for Hiden right now, the excruciating pain might actually be a pleasure. Kenichi Amemiya glanced at the lab, where Hiden's head was still submerged. However, Hiden seemed even more dazed. When Kenichi Amemiya peered into Hiden's head through the one-way glass, he noticed that his eyes were unfocused, as if he were in a daze. However, considering Hiden's current situation, Kenichi Amemiya felt that this daze was actually better for him. Otherwise, being trapped in the darkness for so long, with no idea of time passing, would have been a truly torturous experience. Amemiya Kenichi shook his head, wondering if this would cause Hiden to fall into some strange state of brain death. A state where the brain remains active, but consciousness is completely lost. If that happened, would Hiden still be considered alive? It was a question worth pondering. However, this was also what the teacher was currently researching, and Amemiya Kenichi knew this. He was also looking forward to the teacher's upcoming lab report. Surely there would be some fascinating discoveries? After receiving Hiden's other hand, Amemiya Kenichi returned to his lab and continued his own experiments, but this time he was attempting to use Yin attribute chakra to destroy genes, just as he had just done. But this means I need to stop all my other work. Amemiya Kenichi pinched his brow. If he proceeded with this step, his shadow clone would dissolve. After all, the dispersed shadow clones also took away some of Amemiya Kenichi's chakra, making it impossible to complete the step with his current chakra. Therefore, Amemiya Kenichi decided to continue trying to improve the genetically programmed ninjutsu. As for this unexpected discovery, he could only record it for future research. In fact, in scientific experiments, unexpected results are sometimes obtained during the original experiment. Even if the variables remain unchanged, the same experimental steps may produce completely opposite results. This is why some people say that the end of science is theology. After all, there are too many probabilistic events, and the process of scientific research is essentially a search for stability within probability. So, Amemiya Kenichi once again tried to improve the genetically programmed ninjutsu. Today is the third week of the experiment, but there hasn't been much progress in improving the genetically programmed ninjutsu. Is a 20% success rate the limit? Hiden's arm had been transplanted with a new piece of genetic information, and a prostate had grown on it. It's been 2 months. During these 2 months of experimentation, I've successfully increased the success rate of the genetically programmed ninjutsu by 10%, now reaching 30%. However, Hiden's arm is no longer suitable for testing. His arm has become strangely shaped, with a prostate and seemingly some strange functions. However, I've achieved good results in my experiments on mice. The experiment seems to have hit a bottleneck. I remember the last time I left the lab, it was still winter outside, and now it's autumn, and the success rate of the genetic programming has remained stuck at 35%. The experiments on mice haven't made any progress either. Perhaps it's time to leave the lab and consider a new approach. Amemiya Kenichi pinched his brow, sighed, and then gazed at Hiden's arm before him, lost in thought. Almost a year had passed since he began working on the genetically programmed ninjutsu. In that entire year, Amemiya Kenichi hadn't left the house, except for a visit to his teacher, Orochimaru. The teacher returned in the summer and spoke with Kenichi Amemiya. He explained that things were turbulent in the Hidden Mist village, with the Blood Mist policy causing dissension among more clans, and causing widespread unrest. He hadn't heard any reports of the mysterious masked man being injured, which disappointed Kenichi. It seemed the events in the Hidden Mist village had nothing to do with Obito. However, Kenichi Amemiya remembered that Obito's control over the Mizukage had been discovered, though he wasn't sure when exactly, and it was unclear whether his arrival would have altered the plot. After all, Kenichi Amemiya had already changed a lot. Konoha was facing a rebellion led by the Uchiha clan, with Uchiha Fugaku opening his main Juki Sharingan and using Susanoo. Meanwhile, the Hidden Mist village hadn't yet made their move to seize Hinata Hyuga's Byakugan. Even the war waged by the Hidden Mist village and the Iwagakure village against Konoha quickly subsided, without causing any major disturbance. But Hinata Hyuga's eyes are indeed more unique than those of other Hyuga clan members. Amemiya Kenichi had already obtained Hinata Hyuga's genetic analysis report, which was prepared by his shadow clone. For comparison, Amemiya Kenichi also asked the shadow clone to obtain the blood of an ordinary Hyuga clan branch ninja, and then used it for comparison. As a result, this comparison found that Hinata Hyuga had more genetic information than the branch ninja. This is similar to the situation of the Uchiha clan. This made Amemiya Kenichi even more certain that the Hyuga clan's bloodline was also inherited from the Otsutsuki clan, that is, the bloodline of Otsutsuki Hamura, another brother of the Six Paths sage. However, compared to the descendants of Otsutsuki Hamura on the moon, the Hyuga clan's bloodline is obviously more differentiated, and Hinata Hyuga is the only one in the Hyuga clan with a relatively high blood purity and genes close to those of the ancestors. To some extent, Hinata Hyuga's strength should be very strong. Unfortunately, Hinata Hyuga's personality and her life have caused her to fail to live up to her strength and become mediocre. However, she also passed on her bloodline. Amemiya Kenichi remembers that Hinata Hyuga and Naruto's daughter seemed to be a very strong child. Chapter 265, Smoke in the Uchiha Base. Although I know Hinata Hyuga's bloodline is related to Otsutsuki Hamura, it doesn't seem to have any effect on my current condition. Amemiya Kenichi stroked his chin. Hinata Hyuga's bloodline was present, but it had no effect. Without successfully improving the genetic programming ninjutsu, genetically modifying myself would be extremely difficult. Amemiya Kenichi had considered using the cheat code he'd brought with him from his time travel, but it was still working on the fusion of explosives, and the progress was only 91%. At this rate, it would take about 2 months to complete. Furthermore, Amemiya Kenichi noticed that the progress of this thing slowed down as he progressed, reminiscent of downloading games and movies in his past life. Once it reached 90%, the speed plummeted. It would be even more interesting if a membership offer for a high-speed download channel popped up. Kenichi Amemiya decided to go out and relax. He feared he'd go insane if he continued the experiment. After all, the constant failures were exhausting, not to mention the intense focus required to fully program all the cells. Anyone who's experienced maintaining concentration for extended periods of time can relate to Kenichi Amemiya's feelings. A day or two might be fine, but prolonged periods can be incredibly stressful. With this in mind, Kenichi Amemiya headed to Sanzu Amado's laboratory. Sanzu Amado had previously built a lab not far from his teachers and closer to Kenichi Amemiya's own. Kenichi Amemiya had visited to congratulate him after the lab was completed. Seeing the closed door, Kenichi didn't go in. He now had some understanding of Sanzu Amado. He spent his days researching how to resurrect his daughter and had even exchanged a scroll of the impure world reincarnation jutsu from his teacher. I heard from the teacher that Sanzu Amado's lab is currently experiencing the highest demand for sacrifices due to the impure world reincarnation, imperial world reincarnation process, with a steady rate of 10 sacrifices every month. Fortunately, Sanzu Amado's daughter isn't a ninja, so the impure world reincarnation doesn't require ninja sacrifices. Ordinary people, on the other hand, would consume far too many supplies, a fact that neither the teacher nor Sanzu Amado seemed to care about. Just as he was about to leave, Amemiya Kenichi saw the lab door open. Sanzu Amado and his daughter emerged. Sanzu Amado was taken aback when he saw Amemiya Kenichi. "Amemiya, why are you here?" Sanzu Amado seemed much happier, chatting and laughing, while his daughter, beside him, had a subtle look of worry on her face. Amemiya Kenichi glanced at Sanzu Amado's daughter. He remembered her name as Sanzu Akebe. "The experiments have been a bit difficult lately, so I came out to change my mind." Amemiya Kenichi smiled. He remembered that Sanzu Amado had also done some research on this topic and might be able to discuss it with him. Is it an improvement on the genetically programmed ninjutsu? Sanzu Amado wondered. He'd heard Amemiya Kenichi mention his current research when they'd been chatting. It's too difficult. It's hard to improve the success rate. Amemiya Kenichi sighed. Increasing the success rate of genetically programmed ninjutsu was truly difficult, to the point where his scalp was tingling. At this point, Sanzu Amado seemed a little more excited. He was about to say something to Amemiya Kenichi when he suddenly looked off into the distance. Amemiya Kenichi followed his gaze and saw a plume of smoke rising from the far reaches of the forest. Amemiya Kenichi was stunned. He knew that location. The Uchiha clan that Shisu had led the escape had settled there. The last time Amemiya Kenichi had been there, the clan had already established a small village. Amemiya Kenichi hadn't been there much since then, but he didn't expect smoke to rise from there now. Could they have been attacked? At this thought, Amemiya Kenichi couldn't sit still. He planned to go over and take a look. After all, these Uchiha were his designated employees. "We'll talk later, Mr. Sanzu." Amemiya Kenichi hurried out, sprinting towards the source of the smoke. Sanzu Amado silently withdrew his left hand. He had just been thinking of chatting with Amemiya Kenichi about genetically modified ninjutsu, but he was interrupted before he could even begin. Looking at his daughter beside him, Sanzu Amado's eyes were complicated. His daughter could indeed be resurrected through the impure world reincarnation, which was a good thing, but she didn't really like staying in this world and longed for a life in the Pure Land. This was giving Sanzu Amado a headache. He had come out this time to show his daughter around and cheer her up. He also wanted to ask Orochimaru if he could resolve this issue. Meanwhile, Amemiya Kenichi, after hurriedly traveling, also arrived at the Uchiha clan settlement. Upon arriving, he saw that the Uchiha settlement was still as usual, peaceful and unremarkable. This made Kenichi Amemiya stunned for a moment, and then he found the reason for the smoke: a huge pile of fire. The jubilant crowd, the Uchiha clan and other villagers who were laughing happily, and even Kenichi Amemiya saw some people selling apple candies and grilled squid. This was not an attack at all. This was simply a ceremony. Kenichi Amemiya's mouth twitched. He had thought that the Uchiha clan's village had been attacked, but he didn't expect it to be a festival. Kenichi Amemiya thought about it and realized that this seemed to be a traditional festival in the ninja world, used to celebrate the autumn harvest. Kenichi Amemiya relaxed a little, but after looking around, he was stunned. Because in this lively celebration venue, he saw a familiar figure. Although the other party was wearing a mask, Kenichi Amemiya still recognized the guy in front of him, Obito. Uchiha Obito. This guy actually came here to sell masks? As for why Amemiya Kenichi recognized him, it was naturally because Amemiya Kenichi remembered the pattern of Obito's mask. Obito used this mask under the alias of a fairy. Moreover, the eyes under the mask and some details in the eyes allowed Amemiya Kenichi to distinguish Obito's identity. But what is this guy doing here? Amemiya Kenichi was a little confused. What was Obito doing in this place? Chapter 266. What is Obito doing here? Kenichi Amemiya felt a mix of emotions. After all, he hadn't expected Obito to be selling masks in this place. It didn't quite fit in with Obito's character. If he hadn't been so certain it was Obito, he might have even wondered if he'd seen the wrong person. It was like Luffy finally reaching the holy land of Mirajoa, only to find the 5 elders and the so-called Im-sama selling sweet potatoes on the street every day. Still, Kenichi Amemiya decided to go over and test the waters. After all, Obito couldn't just come here for no reason. He had to have a purpose. A fairy? Kenichi Amemiya whispered as he approached. A flicker of panic crossed Obito's eyes, but he quickly regained his composure, and then a look of pure joy filled his eyes. Kenichi Amemiya couldn't help but admire Obito's acting skills. Beyond anything else, this guy's acting skills alone were unmatched. In his previous life, he'd have been worthy of a golden figure. They're even better than those actors in theaters, who can only recite the lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and then wait for others to dub them. Chinese actors really make too much money, and their professionalism isn't enough. Isn't that you, senpai? Are you here for a mission too? Obito feigned shock and called out enthusiastically. Amemiya Kenichi took a deep breath. He really wanted to record it with a video recorder or something. But Amemiya Kenichi didn't have a habit of carrying a video recorder with him, so the idea was just a thought. However, Amemiya Kenichi still planned to get one with him when he returned this time, so he could record anything he encountered, like dark history or something. Obito shuddered and rubbed his hands. What was going on? He suddenly felt an inexplicable chill. Could it be that he wasn't wearing enough clothes today? Mission? Does the organization have mission here? Amemiya Kenichi scoffed at Obito's words. Are you kidding? Nagato wasn't someone who would be interested in the Uchiha clan. He trusted only his own sage eyes, and the Uchiha Sharingan was nothing special. Furthermore, their whereabouts after defecting from the village were a secret. Nagato couldn't possibly issue a mission to find the Uchiha clan at this time, so Obito must have come on his own accord. However, Kenichi Amemiya wasn't entirely sure what Obito's purpose was. Could he be planning to collect the Manjaki Sharingan? The leader wants to recruit some powerful defector ninja, so he's assigned me to search for them, Obito said with a smile. Kenichi Amemiya couldn't find anything wrong with this, as he knew the Akatsuki was constantly searching for members. Nagato had even told him that, if he could find a powerful defector, he could try to recruit him to the Akatsuki organization. If he showed interest, he could report to him, and he would handle the next steps. As he spoke, Nagato exuded a sense of confidence. It was clear that his sage's eyes and his current record gave him the air of a god. So, do you think there are any strong people in this village? Amemiya Kenichi crouched in front of Obito's stall and casually picked up a mask to examine. The workmanship was crude, and it looked like a wholesale product. There were many different styles of masks in the ninja world. There were even mask sages specializing in mask making in the Sand Village. This made Amemiya Kenichi a little scornful. These people really like to be called sages. Amemiya Kenichi was a little disappointed. He had been hoping to buy the same mask Obito wore here. Although he didn't know what material it was made of, it was very good and seemed to block out the Byakugan's prying eyes, which was quite impressive. Well, I think the members of this village seem to be all rebel ninjas from Konoha's Uchiha clan. Should there be some? Obito said with a smile, his tone uncertain. He looked at Amemiya Kenichi with a smile. The Uchiha clan's rebellion had caused quite a stir, but the most intriguing aspect was their method of leaving Konoha. That magical device that soared high into the sky instantly reminded Obito of Amemiya Kenichi. After all, Amemiya Kenichi was famous for his aerial strikes, earning him the nickname Tenma. However, the Tenma hadn't appeared much recently, which meant only a few ninja who had experienced it remembered its name. Oh, how are you sure? Amemiya Kenichi chuckled, fiddling with his mask. Was Obito reminding him that he already knew about his connection to the Uchiha here? Amemiya Kenichi glanced at Obito. Obito looked perfectly fine, presumably because he hadn't encountered any strong enemies recently, requiring him to retreat into the Kamu dimension. That wouldn't do. Initially, Amemiya Kenichi didn't care about Obito. After all, if Obito retreated into the dimension, he would definitely trigger the treasure he had given him. A reward would be best, but even if not, it wouldn't be a loss. But now that was no longer possible. Obito had already discovered where Uchiha Shisu, Itachi, and Sasuke were, while Kenichi Amemiya had no idea what Obito was up to. What if he'd obtained another Mangekyou Sharingan from here, or even evolved it to the eternal Mangekyou? While Kenichi Amemiya knew the possibility was slim, he couldn't help but be wary. After all, the storyline of the ninja world had been completely altered. He wouldn't be surprised if his teacher turned into a woman and got married. Of course, it's because I saw some handsome men and beautiful women from the Uchiha clan here. I heard the Uchiha clan is all about handsome men and beautiful women. Obito, not forgetting his cherubic persona, said in a playful tone. Really? But I think some of the Uchiha men are quite ugly. Even so, they're still trying to pick up other beautiful women. It's hilarious. Kenichi Amemiya laughed loudly, and Obito's eyes darkened for a moment. He clenched his fists. Although it was reasonable for Amemiya Kenichi to know his identity, he always felt that the man in front of him seemed to know his identity. How could this be possible? His current identity was known to the entire ninja world only to Black Zetsu. Madara was already dead. Chapter 267 Itachi and Sasuke almost hurt Zangian. Kenichi, we Uchiha clan members aren't like that, a helpless voice called out. Amemiya Kenichi turned to look. It was Shisu, Itachi, and Sasuke, who had also emerged. Ahem, I didn't mean to say anything about you. Amemiya Kenichi shrugged. Shisu, Itachi, and Sasuke were all handsome men, and their looks were undeniable. Shisu's looks might not seem impressive in the anime, but he was a handsome man in real life. Itachi and Sasuke, needless to say, captivated countless people in anime, and their looks were even more stunning in real life. It's true that the Uchiha clan's bloodline was quite impressive. At the very least, their looks were truly stunning. In their past lives, they would have been celebrities and internet influencers. Amemiya Kenichi was actually referring to Obito, who was now disfigured. His looks were definitely not as impressive after this, and he could even be said to be able to stop a child from crying at night. Obito chuckled. Damn, why did it feel more and more like Amemiya Kenichi was talking about him? However, Obito's current focus remained on Uchiha Shisu. According to Black Zetsu's intelligence, it was this Uchiha Shisu who had manifested Susanoo during the Uchiha clan's rebellion against Konoha. However, he had also encountered Shisu before, and his eye was intact, likely not his Mangekyou Sharingan. So, what had become of the eye he had given Kakashi? Why did you suddenly want to come to us? Shisu looked at Amemiya Kenichi curiously. His mood had improved considerably recently, and he smiled more often. Compared to the chaotic quagmire of Konoha, Uchiha Shisu found his current life more enjoyable. I thought I'd stop by. Amemiya Kenichi glanced at Obito, who was crouching nearby, blatantly listening to the intel, and smiled. He had just noticed the look Obito was giving Shisu. It seemed Obito was coming for Shisu. Was he after Shisu's Mangekyou Sharingan? However, Kenichi Amemiya felt that Obito wouldn't be tempted to steal Shisu's Sharingan, as Obito hadn't originally intended to steal Itachi's eyes. Speaking of which, who is this? Kenichi Amemiya asked, pointing at Obito. He wanted to see if Shisu and the others knew Obito's identity, or rather, what identity Obito had used to infiltrate the village. Oh, I saw you talking to him here, and I thought you knew him. This is Arfei, a businessman from our village. Shisu glanced at Obito. He had some impression of the masked man. He always wore a mask, never revealing his true face, but such people were not uncommon in the ninja world. Shisu observed him for a while, but then stopped paying attention. However, hearing Kenichi Amemiya's question, Shisu glanced at Obito again. Could there be something wrong with this guy? Otherwise, there was no reason for Kenichi Amemiya to ask him such a question. Kenichi Amemiya glanced at Obito, who seemed a little nervous. He hesitated, but decided not to expose Uchiha Obito's identity right then and there. After all, he was still officially part of the same organization as Obito. Besides, attacking now would only make Obito target him sooner. Kenichi Amemiya decided to try another method to lure Obito into his Camu space. I just heard his voice and thought he was a friend, but I was mistaken, Kenichi Amemiya said, then smiled and pinched Sasuke's face. Sasuke flinched, but when his brother didn't try to stop him, he let Kenichi pinch him anyway. Soft, his skin was incredibly smooth. Compared to the bitter and vengeful Sasuke he would become, this Sasuke was much cuter. Kenichi Amemiya chatted with Shisu and the others as he walked off to the other side. He couldn't let Obito hear what he was saying next. Shisu, are you still ninjas now? Amemiya Kenichi asked, looking at Uchiha Shisu. He hadn't brought Shisu and the others here to play ranch story. Of course. Shisu was a little confused by what Amemiya Kenichi meant. Weren't they ninjas? Then do you know what happened in Konoha before? Amemiya Kenichi glanced at Itachi and Sasuke beside him, unsure what those two unfortunate children would do if they knew this news. Amemiya Kenichi really wanted to tell him, but he couldn't. If he didn't, Uchiha Itachi and Sasuke would become useless if things continued like this. That wouldn't work. Amemiya Kenichi had high hopes for Itachi and Sasuke. When Itachi and Sasuke grew up, he could extract their genes and create clones. Then, using the clones to cultivate the Mangekyou Sharingan, could they both open the eternal Mangekyou? Then, they would be a formidable force. What happened? Shisu was stunned for a moment, then his expression grew serious. He looked at Amemiya Kenichi nervously and asked. He knew Amemiya Kenichi wouldn't ask him this question for no reason. Since he was asking now, it proved something had happened in Konoha, and it was very likely related to them. The Uchiha clan rebelled in Konoha. The Uchiha clan leader, Uchiha Fugaku, activated Susanoo to fight the Sandaime, Danzo, and a number of Konoha clan leaders. He was captured and executed. Amemiya Kenichi sighed. It seemed Uchiha Shisu and the others truly didn't know. Amemiya Kenichi felt a little frustrated. He hadn't meant to sound so harsh, but he hadn't expected Shisu and the others to remain completely unaware of what had happened in Konoha, even though it had happened a year earlier. While Uchiha Shisu and the others had indeed escaped to live their rural lives, Amemiya Kenichi hadn't anticipated how completely blind and deaf they had become. The news of the Uchiha rebellion in Konoha had spread like wildfire, spreading throughout the ninja villages. Even Amemiya Kenichi knew of Uchiha Fugaku's fate. His eyes were gouged out, and he was hung at the entrance of Konoha, serving as a warning to other clans with ulterior motives, and demonstrating Konoha's military might. Uchiha Fugaku's lost eyes were naturally in his teacher's laboratory. The Sandaime had them sent there, hoping to see if he could restore the Mangekyou Sharingan. The footsteps stopped, and Amemiya Kenichi turned around. Shisu stared at him blankly, while Itachi was breathing rapidly, his eyes red. Sasuke stood beside him, stunned. Chapter 268. Is it popular in the ninja world to fight first and then talk? Kenichi Amemiya rested his chin on his hand as he looked at Uchiha Itachi and Sasuke. These two unfortunate souls were in a state of distress, especially Itachi. Upon learning of the death of his clan leader and father, Uchiha Itachi was overcome with emotion and, unable to restrain himself, used Amaterasu to set fire to a nearby stall selling 3-colored dumplings. Fortunately, Kenichi Amemiya used the fire seal in time to seal the flames. The startled vendor, after Shisu paid compensation, also suffered amnesia. However, it's true that Amaterasu's reputation wasn't impressive enough. After all, it was said to be an eternal flame, but in reality, there were many ways to counter it. Much like the Uchiha clan's great fireball jutsu, it was a technique more hype than practical. It's no wonder Itachi rarely used Amaterasu, preferring Tsukuyomi most of the time. After all, Tsukuyomi's illusions were incredibly effective, and could also provide control. Even a few seconds of lapse of consciousness could easily determine the outcome of a high-level battle. Is a clan leader really dead? Shisu couldn't help but ask. Although he knew Amemiya Kenichi wouldn't joke about something like this, with the very existence of his clan at stake, Shisu desperately hoped it was. Yes, his eyes were gouged out, and he was hanged at the entrance of Konoha. Amemiya Kenichi nodded. He knew what Uchiha Shisu was expecting, but sometimes reality was so cruel and unforgiving. Well, Shisu's eyes were dead. Amemiya Kenichi had seen such a look before. In his previous life, Amemiya Kenichi had gone to the hospital with a classmate, and when she saw the test results, her expression was beyond words. And the first time Amemiya Kenichi saw her, she had the same look in her eyes, exactly like Shisu's. Amemiya Kenichi scratched his head. He felt that telling Shisu and Itachi about this might have been a little cruel, but he had to admit that there was nothing to hide. After all, even if he didn't tell them, Shisu and the others would know sooner or later. But these Uchiha seemed to truly cling to their current harmonious and peaceful existence. This was unacceptable. Itachi, standing nearby, seemed to finally emerge from his trance. He abruptly stood up and rushed out in a frenzy, not even caring about Sasuke standing beside him. Itachi. Shisu couldn't help but shout, quickly chasing after him. Well, that guy didn't care about Sasuke either. The poor old man sat there vacantly, apparently unaware that his two brothers no longer wanted him. Amemiya Kenichi couldn't help but sigh, then picked up the dazed Sasuke and quickly followed. After this incident was over, Itachi and Shisu would probably cheer up, right? And then, whether they wanted to or not, they would eventually enter the ninja life they once hated. The ninja world was a meat grinder. Whether the ninja wanted to or not, or whether they wanted to escape, something always drove them, forcing them to throw themselves into it without hesitation, fighting to the death, and constantly dragging others in. This ultimately led to countless tragedies. So, I'm one of the driving forces behind this, right? Amemiya Kenichi muttered to himself, looking at Shisu and Itachi ahead. After all, he could have saved Uchiha Fugaku at that moment, at least allowing him to escape safely. But Amemiya Kenichi didn't. Of course, he admitted he hadn't expected Uchiha Fugaku to be so decisive and destroy his manger key. Previously, Amemiya Kenichi had assumed that if Uchiha Fugaku had the manger key, he would at least have no problem escaping. He hadn't expected him to die and not even be able to use his eyes. It was the first time Amemiya Kenichi had known that the manger key could be destroyed so instantly. So I have to swallow my anger. Just as he passed by, Uchiha Itachi roaring out, frightening little Sasuke so much that he trembled and clutched at Amemiya Kenichi's clothes, shrinking into his arms in fear. Sasuke had never seen his brother so angry. Amemiya Kenichi glanced down at Sasuke in his arms, smiled, and rubbed his head. It felt good. We are not swallowing our anger, Itachi, we are just. Shisu continued trying to soothe Itachi, a clan member he greatly admired. But it was evidently ineffective, as Uchiha Itachi unleashed his manger key, Susanoo rising from the ground, and glaring angrily at the enemy before him. Amemiya Kenichi's mouth twitched. Good fellow, is that how you're wasting your manger key? Instead of using it against the Sandaemon Konoha, you're focusing on internal conflict? No matter what, I'm going to kill the Sandaemon Danzo. Itachi roared in anger, and Shisu felt a surge of worry. This was the first time he'd seen Itachi so out of control. Shisu was speechless. The pain of losing one's parents was indeed excruciating, but if Itachi were to rush to Konoha like this, how would he explain this to the clan leader? If Itachi went to Konoha now, he wouldn't be able to cause much trouble. Itachi's talent was undoubtedly immense, but the problem was that even a genius needed time to realize his talent. Itachi, it seems a fight is the only way to wake you up. Shisu immediately activated his manger key, and instantly two Susanoos faced each other, though of different colors. Kenichi Amemiya suddenly recalled the fear of being dominated by the Titan. While it wasn't a fully formed Susanoo yet, this half Susanoo was enough to withstand many ordinary ninjas. Stop it. Since when did fighting become a common practice in the ninja world before asking questions? Kenichi Amemiya grumbled, stepping over and standing between Shisu and Itachi. Shisu naturally didn't want to fight, nor did he want to confront Itachi. As for Itachi, he had originally disdained Kenichi Amemiya, but seeing his trembling brother in Kenichi's arms, Itachi calmed down a bit. His parents were dead, and he only had his brother left. In other words, his brother only had him. He silently released his Susanoo, lowered his head, and sat on the ground without a word. The air suddenly became heavy and gloomy. It seemed that under immense pressure and stress, Itachi had successfully transformed into the pressure boy, silently releasing his stress. Actually, your father's death wasn't completely meaningless, Amemiya Kenichi said, putting Sasuke down, and looking at Itachi. Itachi remained silent, his head bowed. I only learned later that Konoha had issued wanted orders for several Uchiha clan members, including Uchiha Makoto. Amemiya Kenichi continued. Itachi's body trembled, but he still didn't look up. Then I thought about it. Your father's fundamental reason for opening his Mangekyou Sharingan wasn't to seize power and usurp the throne. His sole purpose was to ensure the survival of some of the clan, to ensure the survival of your mother. Amemiya Kenichi sighed. Only later did he understand the full story. A group of Uchiha clan members had taken advantage of the chaos to flee Konoha, including Uchiha Fugaku's wife, Uchiha Makoto. With that in mind, everything Uchiha Fugaku did became clear and understandable. Itachi still didn't look up, but Amemiya Kenichi keenly noticed the grass where Itachi sat, bent by the water droplets. Males often hesitate to expose their vulnerable side, and Amemiya Kenichi knew this, so he didn't expose it. Amemiya Kenichi stood silently. Honestly, he had always thought Uchiha Fugaku was a softie. After all, in the original story, facing the extermination of his clan's son, he did nothing, calmly accepting his death, after questioning the reason. But now, Amemiya Kenichi unexpectedly saw another side of Uchiha Fugaku, his courage to die for his family. Even knowing the consequences of being captured by Konoha, he still fought to protect his people and escape. In this sense, Uchiha Fugaku was truly a hero. After all, death is only a momentary pain. Even for a ninja like Uchiha Fugaku, the pain might only last a moment. But if captured by Konoha, the pain would be infinitely prolonged. Konoha had its share of torture experts. How many people could withstand such inhumane torture? Where is the clan leader? Where is the clan leader's wife? Shisu grasped the crux of the matter. The clan leader's death was irreversible, but Uchiha Makoto could be. Uchiha Makoto was still alive. If Uchiha Makoto could be found, then Itachi and Sasuke would probably be better off, right? I don't know either. Amemiya Kenichi shrugged. He really didn't know. After all, he left Konoha and left immediately. He didn't pay much attention to what happened afterwards. He only knew that some Uchiha clan members had left, including Uchiha Makoto. But where did this group of Uchiha go? Amemiya Kenichi didn't know. I want to find my mother. Itachi raised his head. His eyes were red, but there were no tears on his face. He probably wiped them away. I'll help you, Itachi. Shisu agreed immediately, as long as he didn't go to Konoha to cause trouble for the Sandaime right now. After all, Itachi was still too young, and his physical strength, chakra, and ninjutsu skills were far behind the Sandaimes. Itachi would be a dead end if he went there now, and it would be useless. Amemiya Kenichi had no objections. Finding Uchiha Makoto would be the best option, as finding her would also mean finding the rest of the Uchiha clan, which would increase their numbers and presumably increase their profit margins. I can help too. Amemiya Kenichi smiled. While he didn't have any other methods, he naturally made polite remarks, and wouldn't it be a good idea to say something to gain some favor? Shisu and Itachi didn't refuse. After all, while the ninja world wasn't very large, finding a group of people in hiding was still quite difficult. Shisu, how do you feel about your life now? Amemiya Kenichi asked the question again with a smile. Shisu didn't answer immediately after hearing it. Of course he knew what Amemiya Kenichi meant. Is the Uchiha clan really going to degenerate like this? Become farmers? You have to know that, although Uchiha Shisu brought these clansmen out to escape the melting pot of Konoha, many clansmen still have their own ties within the clan, their own family and friends. You can imagine what will happen after this news spreads. Moreover, as members of the Uchiha clan, they heard the news of the clan from Amemiya Kenichi, an outsider. It has to be said that this is a bit ironic, and Uchiha Shisu also understood what Amemiya Kenichi meant. What do you mean? Shisu looked uncertain. Think about it yourself. Amemiya Kenichi didn't say anything explicitly, leaving it to Shisu to consider. However, Amemiya Kenichi felt that Shisu would agree. After all, whether it was to repay Shisu for bringing them out, or to avenge their hatred of Konoha, the Uchiha clan had no choice but to re-enter the vortex of war, even if they were reluctant. Brother, will mom come back? Amemiya Kenichi felt someone tug at the corner of his clothes. He looked down and saw it was Sasuke. Sasuke asked nervously, biting his lower lip. For Sasuke now, it was difficult to understand life and death, but he knew his mother could come back, so he asked anxiously. For children, not having their mothers around always made them uneasy. Amemiya Kenichi had heard Shisu say before that Sasuke cried many times because he didn't have his parents, but fortunately, Itachi was there. I'll be back. Amemiya Kenichi rubbed Sasuke's head. The touch was truly pleasant, and the thought of the cold Sasuke of the future only made him happier. After all, rubbing Sasuke's head wasn't something you'd get all the time. Thank you. Itachi joined him, bowing earnestly, his head level with the ground. It's okay, I just want to help you, Amemiya Kenichi said calmly. He had come to see what the smoke was all about, but he'd unexpectedly discovered that Sasuke and the others were living a life of relative ease. This wouldn't do. Amemiya Kenichi didn't want to cripple Sasuke and Itachi. No matter what happens, I'll repay you. Uchiha Itachi looked at Amemiya Kenichi seriously. He hadn't heard him mention a reward. He hadn't even asked for one when he left Konoha. Since he didn't want any money, it meant the Uchiha clan was in his debt, and a debt of gratitude is the hardest to repay. Amemiya Kenichi was stunned for a moment, then smiled and nodded. Chapter 269. Crossing the river by feeling the kin. What can we do? Shisu asked, looking at Kenichi Amemiya as they walked along the dirt road outside the village. Itachi and Sasuke had already returned, and Itachi needed to take care of Sasuke. After all, Sasuke was still young, and couldn't accompany his brother on the search for their mother. Therefore, Itachi had to shoulder this heavy responsibility alone, while Sasuke would be entrusted to the village's clansmen. Well, let's set up some departments first. Intelligence, operations, combat, and so on. Kenichi Amemiya stroked his chin. He certainly knew what Shisu meant. Itachi was no fool, and neither was Shisu. Shisu clearly understood that his long-term assistance to the Uchiha clan couldn't be without purpose, and he hadn't asked for any reward, such as gold, silver, or jewelry. A debt of gratitude is hard to repay. Shisu gave Kenichi Amemiya a deep look. Although he had heard Kenichi Amemiya express his ideals back on the airship, now seeing this, Shisu realized that Kenichi Amemiya was truly serious. Was he truly planning to establish a new nation? Uchiha Shisu felt a bit bewildered. He hadn't even considered establishing a nation. He'd only planned to build a simple village, one capable of self-preservation, where his people could live in peace. And yet, Amemiya Kenichi was thinking of unifying the entire world. Remember what I told you? If the ninja world wants to maintain long-term stability and peace, without war, without all the things that cause people pain and hatred, then it must be unified. Amemiya Kenichi glanced at Uchiha Shisu beside him. While using favors to get these Uchiha to do things for him was certainly possible, it was better to get them to do things willingly. That was the best option, and like-minded people could work together towards a common goal. Just like the Akatsuki organization founded by Nagato Yohiko, while initially a utopian organization, it was precisely this utopian ideal that made it feared by Hanzo. If Amemiya Kenichi wanted to establish a nation, he also had to establish a goal, one that seemed grand, one that would stir passion and inspire people to die for it. Peace was the bait Amemiya Kenichi offered. In his previous life, Kenichi Amemiya didn't quite grasp the value of peace. Although he faced some threats, the nation's strength was sufficient to allow him to live a stable life. However, after arriving in the ninja world, Kenichi Amemiya truly understood its value. The ninja world felt like it was constantly at war, with occasional major wars and near constant minor frictions and conflicts. This was why Akatsuki's philosophy was so resonant. After all, people truly hated the near-endless war. Furthermore, compared to Nagato and Yohiko's ideas, Kenichi Amemiya felt his own was more feasible. With the establishment of a single nation, the distinctions between nations would disappear. After a period of stability, achieving peace would be much easier. This was a common practice. There were numerous states during the spring and autumn period and the warring states period, but after the unification of Xinjiang, people from various nations coexisted. Then, after a long period of peace and stability during the Han Dynasty, the overall situation remained very stable and peaceful. While some remnants of the nobles of the Six Kingdoms certainly sought to restore their kingdoms, they couldn't cause much trouble given the unchanged overall environment. Furthermore, people yearned for peace, at least the majority of the common people, leading to their subsequent transition to Han Chinese. This unified identity fostered a stronger sense of identity with their nation. Unless the rulers went mad and caused their subjects to rebel, peace could prevail for a long time. This was the ultimate weapon that Amemiya Kenichi, after much deliberation, devised, a ready-made, plausible bait destined to draw countless ninja and civilians to their deaths. He could even attempt to persuade Nagato to serve him, and the Akatsuki to serve him. However, to achieve this, he had to confront two individuals, no, three who stood before him, unavoidably. Uchiha Obito, Black Zetsu, and Uchiha Madara. Are you serious? Although this wasn't the first time Uchiha Shizu had heard this, he still felt a sense of disbelief. After all, the idea was undoubtedly a bit crazy. Unifying the 5 great ninja villages, the 5 great nations, and all the other nations involved, wasn't something that could be accomplished with a single word. Furthermore, the Uchiha clan didn't have that many members. Fighting Konoha alone would be difficult, let alone the 5 great nations. It would be like trying to stop a chariot with a mantis arm. Of course, I even have a plan in mind. Amemiya Kenichi nodded matter-of-factly. He wasn't saying this to tease Shizu. He truly intended to unify the entire ninja world and embark on a new path. The ninja world was too small, and there was no need for conflict. He yearned more for the vast sea of stars, for the land where the Tatsuki clan had come from. What could be more exciting than ushering the ninja world into the interstellar age? How do you plan to do it? Shizu asked curiously. He wasn't just curious, he also wanted to see how plausible Amemiya Kenichi's ideas were. After all, this ideal was too grand. Even if the Uchiha clan owed him a favor, it required careful consideration. It's simple. The first step is to take control of a ninja village. Amemiya Kenichi understood Shizu's concerns, so he shared his thoughts with him. In Amemiya Kenichi's view, unifying the ninja world couldn't be achieved by simply declaring war on the entire ninja world, or simultaneously challenging the 5 major nations by shouting about villages, bonds, close friends, and the ninja way. His strategy was to make friends with distant nations and attack nearby ones, gradually conquering them. The Hidden Mist Village and the Water Country are a good starting point. We'll first control the Hidden Mist Village, then occupy the Water Country. Finally, using the Water Country as a base, we'll infiltrate the Hidden Sand Village, then reach out to the Earth Country, and finally, the Hidden Cloud and Konoha. Amemiya Kenichi briefly outlined his strategy. He didn't finish. After all, he didn't know if Black Zetsu was eavesdropping. And crucially, to finish it all would be incredibly time consuming, potentially leaving him with nothing to do for the next few days. Of course, he had another idea, to emulate Uchiha Madara and use absolute force to suppress all disobedience, single-handedly challenge the coalition of the 5 great nations and defeat the 5 Cage. Unifying the ninja world would then be much easier. However, this idea presupposed being as strong as, or even stronger than, Uchiha Madara, and Kenichi Amemiya was still a ways off from that. Uchiha Shizu didn't immediately respond, instead pondering the feasibility of Kenichi Amemiya's suggestion. The Hidden Mist Village in the Land of Water was indeed a very attractive target. After all, it was isolated, and the likelihood of other ninja villages and nations knowing about its happenings was relatively low. Even if they did, disseminating the information would be difficult. Furthermore, the Land of Water was still one of the 5 great nations, and controlling and occupying it would significantly reduce their subsequent pressure. Furthermore, the second target was the Hidden Sand Village, the weaker of the 5 great nations. You really are serious? Uchiha Shizu sighed, looking at Kenichi Amemiya. He initially thought Amemiya Kenichi was joking, even before, but he hadn't expected him to have even thought of the basics. He must be serious. Of course, Amemiya nodded. Since arriving in the ninja world, Amemiya Kenichi had thought about what he wanted to do. His ultimate goal was to journey into the vast sea of stars, to see if the galaxies of this world were the same as those he knew in his previous life. Then, he would seek out the Satsuki clan, plunder their technology and military power, and ultimately establish a galactic empire. Then we'll do our part. Uchiha Shizu looked at Amemiya Kenichi, hesitated, then nodded seriously. He too was tired of the endless wars, and he didn't want his clan members, his younger generations, to live in the same world he had, a world filled with war and hatred. Amemiya Kenichi smiled at this, and then he and Shizu continued discussing their plans. Now that they had decided on their strategy, they had to execute it. Empty talk wouldn't cut it. When Amemiya Kenichi and Shizu returned to the village, they found the atmosphere subdued. Even the civilians who weren't members of the Uchiha clan had fallen silent, all because of the grief-stricken expressions of the Uchiha clan members they passed by. It seems Itachi has already made this known, Amemiya Kenichi said, looking at the people before him. Previously cheerful, his expression now etched in a hushed tone. It was clear he knew what had happened. Shizu took a deep breath. He had instructed Itachi to do this. The Uchiha clan had grown so comfortable in the village that they had forgotten their proud Uchiha identity, ninja. Ninja codes had been completely forgotten, and even no one ventured out to gather intelligence. This led to the annihilation of the remaining Uchiha clan members in Konoha, something they had learned from an outsider like Amemiya Kenichi. Shizu wanted to use this as a way to convince his clan members that they should rise up and accept their fate, their destiny as ninja. What are you going to do? Go find them first. Amemiya Kenichi glanced at Shizu, who was, after all, the village's leader. Well, first, find those who left the village and bring them back, and then. Uchiha Shizu didn't give it much thought. He did indeed intend to do just that, bring his people back, and then move on. Then have you considered whether, if we bring them back now, they'll cry out for revenge or something? Amemiya Kenichi asked, looking at Uchiha Shizu with interest. Uchiha Shizu was stunned for a moment. It was clear he hadn't considered that question. Amemiya Kenichi knew it at a glance. He didn't know if the Uchiha clan would do that, but the likelihood was low. After all, the Uchiha clan hadn't come to Konoha to cause trouble in such a long time, so it was likely that Uchiha Makoto had played a role. Of course, the most likely possibility was that Uchiha Fugaku had already informed his clansmen, telling them that they didn't need to seek revenge for him or anything like that. You're the cage of this village now. You need to think carefully before you act, weighing the pros and cons. It's no easy task. Amemiya Kenichi patted Shizu's shoulder. Sarutobi Hiruzen excelled in this regard. He was the Hokage who most closely resembled a politician in Konoha. While he was criticized for many things, it was undeniable that his original intention was to improve the village. Yes, Shizu nodded. Indeed, he hadn't considered everything fully. Now that these clansmen had followed him, he was responsible for everything, so he needed to continue growing. Everyone, listen to me, Shizu said, walking over and gathering his clansmen. They were going out to search for their families. Although the journey might be difficult and risky, they would see it through to the end. Amemiya Kenichi watched from the side, his chin in his hand. Shizu was quite capable, and his character was also good. Amemiya Kenichi believed that with some training, he might even be able to share some of the administrative responsibilities in the future. Although Amemiya Kenichi intended to unify the ninja world and establish a nation, he ultimately didn't intend to remain in power for too long. He didn't want to be distracted by the myriad affairs of life. The Yondaime had once remarked on the exhausting nature of being Hokage. He still desired to pursue truth and science in his own laboratory. Therefore, it was necessary to train those who could share administrative duties with him, thereby establishing a comprehensive political system for his future great empire. Well, those people in the Pure Land have considerable experience. I'd be interested if I could use them. Amemiya Kenichi rubbed his chin. He had an idea to establish a system of heroic spirits, allowing these talented individuals to serve him even after death. As he pondered this, he saw two figures standing before him. He glanced up, Itachi Uchiha and Satsuki. Itachi looked a little embarrassed. So, what was going on? Honestly, I think the possibility of achieving peace is still very high. Chapter 270 The second meeting between Sas and Naruto. You mean, you want to entrust Sasuke to me temporarily? Amemiya Kenichi looked at Itachi in surprise, then glanced at Sasuke beside him. Although Itachi had already said this, Amemiya Kenichi still found it absurd after hearing it again. After all, Amemiya Kenichi had never thought that Uchiha Itachi would entrust Sasuke to him. Did Itachi have no one he could trust? Although it seemed that Itachi's only friend was Shizu, that wasn't entirely true. After all, there were some minor characters who were definitely not described. Amemiya Kenichi had heard Shizu mention that Itachi might entrust Sasuke to a ninja named Hayato. Uchiha Hayato was a name Amemiya Kenichi had never heard of before, but he had heard of someone named Nico, which was quite unique. Well, because everyone wants to go out and look for their clan members this time, Itachi said, a little embarrassed, but he explained that he had originally planned to entrust Sasuke to a few friends, but the problem was that they were all going out to look for the Uchiha ninja who had rebelled against the village. After a brief walk, Itachi realized he didn't seem to have any friends to turn to. He then remembered what Shizu had said about Kenichi Amemiya, a brilliant ninja, and decided to entrust Sasuke to him. Itachi also felt that given their friendship, Kenichi wouldn't do anything to Sasuke. Kenichi nodded in understanding. This made sense. After all, while these Uchiha had indeed left home to live the lives they desired, they hadn't completely severed their family ties. So, it was natural for them to want to search for someone after hearing the news. After all, until accurate information arrived, everyone secretly hoped that one of their family members was still alive. Kenichi even suspected that these people might harbor a hope, hoping to find their family and friends, rather than discovering they died in Konoha. Although the probability of that was low, he wondered. Sasuke, would you be willing? Kenichi rubbed Sasuke's head. That touch was truly amazing. I'll wait for my brother to come back. Sasuke sniffed, his voice tinged with tears, as if he'd just been crying. After all, his brother was leaving too, and that was a difficult situation for Sasuke to accept. He'd already been dealing with his parents' absence, and now his brother was leaving too. Little Sasuke was suddenly alone, and there was no way he could be happy. Amemiya Kenichi finally agreed. Taking Sasuke with him was a good option, and he could also try to see if the Six Paths Sage was keeping an eye on him. However, proving that was a bit tricky. Would you like to buy a mask, bro? Just as Amemiya Kenichi was about to leave the village with Sasuke, Obito approached and winked at him. Amemiya Kenichi's mouth twitched. Obito, this guy. Mask. Sasuke's eyes lit up, and he instinctively reached out, but before he could touch him, he pulled back and glanced cautiously at Amemiya Kenichi. Seeing this, Kenichi Amemiya immediately took out the money to buy a mask. However, what he didn't expect was that Sasuke actually picked a fox mask and then put it on happily. Thank you, brother Amemiya. Sasuke smiled happily. Kenichi Amemiya rubbed Sasuke's head with a smile. It would be good to cultivate a relationship with Sasuke, so that Sasuke would be more devoted to him in the future. Brother, is this your brother? Obito asked curiously. Kenichi Amemiya glanced at him. How could this guy not know Sasuke's identity? He probably wanted to test what he was doing with Sasuke. Sasuke, you can't talk to weird uncles. Kenichi Amemiya picked up Sasuke and left, leaving Obito standing there with a grim expression. He looked at Kenichi Amemiya's back, then looked at little Sasuke, hesitated for a moment, and then quietly returned to his stall. Sasuke was too young to wield the power of the Manger Key. It's almost as if Uchiha of that age was still playing in the mud. He still planned to keep an eye on Shizu and the man named Itachi. Itachi's eyes seemed peculiar, causing Obito to question his own life. He had gone through so much to open the Manger Key, but what had Itachi been through? After leaving with Sasuke in his arms, Kenichi Amemiya began to wonder where he should go. He had nowhere else to go, and returning to the lab with Sasuke was out of the question. After some hesitation, Kenichi Amemiya decided to take Sasuke to Konoha. He wanted to take Sasuke back for a visit, but also to visit Naruto, who was now a year older. It was time to consider taking him under his wing. At the very least, cultivating a bond would be possible, and Naruto was more suitable as a disciple than others. After all, Naruto was known for his respect for his teacher, unlike other ninjas who were eager to kill their master to achieve enlightenment. the representative figures are Nagato, Obito, and the teacher. Why do I feel like a trainer now that I mention it? Kenichi Amemiya scratched his head. It was just like playing the mobile game Naruto, collecting some rare characters, and then training them into powerful characters, but the reality is much more conscientious than the game. Kenichi Amemiya collected Sasuke and Naruto without spending 648 or anything. Sasuke, do you want to go to Konoha to play? Kenichi Amemiya squatted down and pinched Sasuke's little face. So tender. Yes. Sasuke agreed without hesitation, and then blinked his eyes and looked at Kenichi Amemiya. Sasuke suddenly felt that the big brother in front of him was really good. Children are children. They were crying before, but when they encountered something interesting, they instantly became happy. This change of mood is really fast. However, looking at Sasuke's eyes, Kenichi Amemiya also had some strange ideas. Sasuke still hadn't opened his eyes yet. Even though his father was dead, Sasuke still hadn't opened his eyes. It was difficult for children to understand many things, and Amemiya Kenichi hadn't expected Sasuke to open his eyes. But if he used his previous, well, forget it. He didn't want Itachi and Shisu to turn on him when they returned. Besides, after a year in the lab, his skin had almost turned as pale as a ghost. A walk out once in a while was a nice change of pace. Come on, I'll take you there. Amemiya Kenichi led Sasuke to a relatively secluded spot outside the village. He then summoned an airship and, in the airship, took Sasuke out of the land of rice and flew towards Konoha. As Amemiya Kenichi left, a man emerged from the ground. He licked his lips as he watched the rapidly shrinking black shadow in the sky. Hehe, this Amemiya Kenichi is quite interesting. Can he fly this way? Black Zetsu had been hiding nearby, observing his every move. This was, of course, Obito's order, but he also wanted to see what he would do. However, he didn't expect to see how Amemiya Kenichi flew. This made Black Zetsu wonder if this method would affect his plan, but he quickly realized it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, even though this thing could fly, it would still be affected by the moon. So, once Madara executed his infinite Tsukuyomi plan, Amemiya Kenichi's hiding in the sky wouldn't have any effect. Obito, you're really too worried about taking that brat to Konoha at this time. Black Zetsu burrowed back underground. He had to go back and talk to Obito, otherwise he'd start nagging him all day and all night long, which was really annoying. Kenichi Amemiya, however, hadn't noticed the other person below. After all, Black Zetsu's hiding skills were truly impressive, and he seemed to have a way of concealing his presence, so he hadn't noticed his presence either. Sitting in the airship, Kenichi Amemiya steered it swiftly towards Konoha. Soon, he spotted Konoha's relatively large buildings and a figure sitting by a stream. Is that Naruto? Kenichi Amemiya raised an eyebrow. It seemed he had a lucky break today, running into Naruto right there. Kenichi Amemiya found a spot to park the airship, then walked out with Sasuke, heading towards the spot he remembered Naruto as. Brother Amemiya, aren't we going to Konoha? Sasuke asked, tugging on Kenichi Amemiya's hand. Yeah, you saw Konoha too, right? But going directly there would be trouble, so we have to go this way. Kenichi Amemiya rubbed Sasuke's head, curious about what would happen when Sasuke and Naruto met. 3 more. It seems the sand aim is really good with Naruto. Kenichi Amemiya crouched in the treetops nearby, observing Naruto's position. He could already sense the presence of 3 ninjas. They formed a triangular formation, surrounding Naruto, or rather, monitoring him. After all that Konoha had gone through, Naruto's presence was crucial. A Jinchuriki like the Ninetales must be kept safe, but too many people would easily arouse suspicion, hence the need for a small ANBU team to protect Naruto. Having easily dispatched the 3 ANBU monitoring Naruto, Kenichi Amemiya took Sasuke's hand and approached Naruto, who was fishing in the stream. Naruto, are you fishing? Kenichi Amemiya crouched beside Naruto and raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected Naruto to be out fishing at this hour. It seemed like little Naruto was starting to struggle financially, but this didn't seem right. After all, the sand aim supposedly provided Naruto with living expenses, as both the anime and the manga had mentioned. But it was also true that Naruto was out fishing. What was going on? It's the big brother I met last time. Naruto recognized Kenichi Amemiya and stood up with joy, then frantically reached for the simple fishing rod he had just made. He remembered Kenichi Amemiya. After all, he was one of the few people who didn't harbor any ill will towards him, and he was very kind to him, which made a lasting impression on Naruto, who had always been discriminated against. But this fishing rod was crucial to his current diet, so Naruto naturally couldn't just abandon it. Sasuke stood beside Kenichi Amemiya, observing Naruto curiously. He had some impression of him. After all, he'd had things thrown at him by the adults in the village, and his mother had forbidden him from approaching him. But now, "Are you fishing?" Sasuke asked curiously, leaning over. He remembered an uncle in his family who loved fishing, but he'd been turned away when he tried, saying he was too young. But this kid looked about the same age as him, and he could even fish. "Yes, I'm fishing. I can grill some fish later." Naruto looked at his peer with some surprise. He didn't look that old, but he didn't dislike him. "Aren't you afraid of me?" Naruto asked hesitantly. For as long as he could remember, most people had treated him with disgust and alienation. His peers wouldn't play with him, calling him a demon fox. This made Naruto deeply saddened. But this guy before him wasn't afraid of him at all. "Why should I be afraid of you? Will you turn into a fire-breathing monster?" Sasuke asked warily. Standing nearby, Kenichi Amemiya almost burst out laughing as he quickly pulled a TV camera from his pocket and began recording. Well, the ninja world even had TV programs, so TVs weren't surprising. They were just expensive, and most people couldn't afford them. Of course, that wasn't a problem for Kenichi Amemiya. And this was Sasuke's dark past. When Sasuke grew up, it would become his most embarrassing dark past. Could money really explain this? Of course not. Of course not. "I'm a ninja." Naruto shook his head. How could he turn into a fire-breathing monster? Was he still human? "I'm a ninja too." The kid's strange desire to win came up, and Sasuke immediately said that he was also a powerful ninja. Amemiya Kenichi rubbed his face. He couldn't, really couldn't. He was almost unable to laugh. The meeting between Sasuke and Naruto was too interesting. At this moment, Amemiya Kenichi heard a gurgling sound coming from Naruto's stomach. "Naruto, didn't you eat?" Amemiya Kenichi looked at the blushing Naruto and sighed in his heart. This is the son of the 4th generation. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 271. So how much is Naruto's living expenses per month? The son of the 4th Hokage, the son of a hero, had fallen to the point of not even having enough to eat. The 3rd Hokage was truly taking things too far. Kenichi Amemiya knew this. The 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, had considerable savings, and so did Kushina Uzumaki. Their combined savings, if nothing else, would have allowed Naruto to live comfortably, and he certainly wouldn't have been starving. When Kenichi Amemiya had first gone to befriend Kakashi, under the guise of Minato and Kushina, he'd often been dragged out to dinner by Minato. Later, when Minato became the 4th Hokage, it was Kushina Uzumaki who would take Kenichi Amemiya out to dinner. The Akimichi family's barbecue restaurant wasn't cheap, but Kenichi Amemiya and Kakashi went there almost a dozen times a month, eating quite a bit each time. Back then, a single meal was like a drop in the bucket for Minato and Kushina, demonstrating the relative wealth of their families. Even if Naruto's identity couldn't be publicly revealed as the Yondame's son to protect his identity, at least allowing him to inherit his parents' estate should have been acceptable. Even if there were concerns about Naruto not being able to keep it, then why hadn't Naruto heard the Sandame say anything similar after growing up? If the Sandame had provided a generous monthly allowance, Naruto wouldn't have gone hungry. But now, Naruto truly had nothing to eat. "I haven't eaten all day," Naruto said, looking a little embarrassed. He lowered his head and rubbed his stomach, a trace of embarrassment on his face. Seeing this, Kenichi Amemiya couldn't help but take a deep breath. Sarutobi Hiruzen, no matter how many excuses you have, this incident with Naruto will forever be a black mark on your life. No wonder during the Fourth Shinobi World War, when Naruto's inner thoughts were relayed to the others, the Sandaime remained silent, and the Yondaime's expression was even more complicated. One wonders what he was thinking at the time. Was he thinking he should have just brought the tailed beast bowl to Konoha? The village he'd given everything to protect, the village he'd sacrificed his life to protect, only to receive this in return from Naruto. Eating fish is easy, just use a ninjutsu, Amemiya Kenichi said, grinning and raising his hand. Then, a flash of lightning leaped into the river before him, and countless fish floated to the surface, belly up, stunned by the shock. Ninjutsu. Big brother, what kind of ninjutsu is this? Naruto instantly became excited. Looking at Naruto's joy, Amemiya Kenichi's eyes held a hint of helplessness. Naruto was truly optimistic, almost speechless. To endure such treatment and still dream of becoming Hokage and gaining everyone's approval, how could he? This isn't a ninjutsu, it's just a simple lightning style chakra technique. Amemiya Kenichi smiled. He didn't dare use a ninjutsu with too much power, as the excessive chakra fluctuations would likely attract Konoha's attention. And Kenichi Amemiya knew that the old man, the Sandaime, had mastered the telescope jutsu. If he'd used it to search for Naruto's current location, it would have been troublesome. Fortunately, he could still detect the chakra fluctuations of the telescope jutsu. Lightning release. Chakra. Naruto's small eyes were filled with confusion. He didn't quite understand what Kenichi Amemiya was saying, but that was understandable. Naruto probably hadn't even started ninja school yet, so he definitely didn't know much about these things. Chakra is what's essential for performing ninjutsu and becoming a ninja. Sasuke interjected. He understood. After all, his brother often talked to him about this kind of thing, so Sasuke had learned a lot from him. Naruto looked at Sasuke with envy. He didn't know these things. He only knew that becoming a ninja would gain recognition from others, and becoming Hokage would earn everyone's approval. He wanted everyone's approval now, so they wouldn't hate him anymore, right? Yes, Sasuke is right. Chakra is essential to becoming a ninja. Amemiya Kenichi nodded, then casually brought up a few fish, 5 in total, 2 for Sasuke and Naruto, and 1 for himself. Amemiya Kenichi wasn't particularly fond of fish, otherwise he'd have at least 2 to try, but for now, 1 would suffice. Naruto nodded with an I get it look on his face, and Amemiya Kenichi felt like laughing. This little guy definitely didn't understand. Let's have grilled fish. Amemiya Kenichi sat down and simply cut open the fish, removed the internal organs, and skewered it on a branch before grilling it. But just as he was about to start grilling the fish, he noticed Naruto glancing at the fish's internal organs. Amemiya Kenichi was stunned for a moment, then looked at Naruto thoughtfully, and then thought of the possibility that Naruto was looking at the fish's internal organs in this way. Naruto, fish offal is generally not to be eaten. Some are poisonous, Amemiya Kenichi warned Naruto. Some fish offal is poisonous, and Amemiya Kenichi only eats fish he recognizes. He wouldn't touch fish he didn't recognize, lest he get diarrhea or something. Amemiya Kenichi once heard his teacher tell him that during the Second Shinobi World War, Jiraiya got sick from breakfast and had to go to the restroom countless times while on missions, nearly getting into some hilarious situations. Since then, Jiraiya has been wary of eating anything he doesn't recognize. Even if he did, he had to be around Tsunade, or else he wouldn't eat. Hearing this, Amemiya Kenichi remembered Jiraiya's need to go to the restroom during battles, and the thought reminded him to be more careful with what he eats next. But I eat this fish often. Naruto swallowed. Amemiya Kenichi's mouth twitched. Often? Did he mean Naruto was often hungry? What kind of life was this unfortunate child leading in Konoha? Amemiya Kenichi had considered kidnapping Naruto and bringing him to his side, but taking Naruto would mean Konoha's Ninetales Jinchuriki would be gone. He had no idea what the Sandaime would do, and he had no idea if it would significantly alter the plot. If the Sandaime went completely mad, or if Nagato acted prematurely, that would be very troublesome. And if Naruto stayed with him, and Obito and Black Zetsu noticed, that would be troublesome too. Simply put, there were too many variables. Don't eat it next time. Offal doesn't taste very good, Amemiya Kenichi warned, though he wasn't sure if Naruto would listen. After all, Naruto was known for being quite opinionated. Grilling fish wasn't difficult for Amemiya Kenichi. He just needed to pay attention to the heat, and there were basically no other challenges. Once the fish was cooked through, he simply sprinkled some seasoning on it. It could even be said that the flavor of grilled fish was essentially made up of the seasoning. Of course, some discerning gourmets would also have their own requirements for the charcoal used. However, Kenichi Amemiya naturally had no such needs. He grilled fish in a simple way, adding a little chili powder or other seasonings. Soon, 5 grilled fish were ready. He handed to each to Naruto and Sasuke, and slowly devoured one himself. As he ate, Kenichi Amemiya observed Sasuke and Naruto. Sasuke ate the grilled fish slowly, chewing and swallowing carefully, while Naruto ate quickly, devouring it ravenously. Strangely, Naruto didn't get stuck on the fish bones when eating grilled fish. He spat them out perfectly. It seemed Naruto was someone who ate grilled fish so often that he had the experience. Kenichi Amemiya had to remove the bones from his mouth, but Naruto didn't. Naruto, aren't you making enough money to live on? Why did you suddenly want to go out for grilled fish? Kenichi Amemiya asked. He wanted to see how much Naruto was making to live on, as he felt so embarrassed. Grandpa Hokage gives me 5,000 ryo every month, but I use it, Naruto said happily. Amemiya Kenichi was stunned when he heard this. How much? 5,000 ryo? What could 5,000 ryo do? A bowl of Ichiraku ramen in Konoha costs 60 ryo, and a more expensive one 70 or 80 ryo. Even if Naruto ate ramen 3 times a day, it would still cost 180 ryo. And would that be enough just for ramen? Naruto also drank milk, and with all the other miscellaneous expenses, it was no wonder Naruto was in such a tight spot. Amemiya Kenichi scratched his head. 5,000 ryo? He could sometimes spend over 1,000 ryo on a barbecue meal. He had never expected the Sannin to only give Naruto 5,000 ryo. It was simply incomprehensible. But after listening to Naruto's words, Amemiya Kenichi realized that it was quite normal for Naruto to spend money so quickly. After all, Naruto often bought ninja tools for training, so 5,000 ryo wasn't enough. If Naruto didn't buy them, he could probably still have enough to eat every month. Sasuke, how much is your monthly living expenses? Amemiya Kenichi asked, looking at Sasuke beside him. Sasuke must have had a lot before, but that wasn't certain now. After all, the Uchiha clan had left Konoha, and they couldn't take all that money with them. Brother gives me 30,000 ryo every month, Sasuke answered instinctively, but then he froze. He glanced at the surprised Naruto and silently corrected himself. No, it's 3,000 ryo, Sasuke said with certainty this time. Amemiya Kenichi wasn't surprised by Sasuke's personality. After all, Sasuke was actually quite nice and considerate now, not the cold, avenging tyrant anymore. However, 30,000 ryo was definitely the living expenses Itachi gave Sasuke. He just didn't know where Sasuke spent it. After all, he looked so. Amemiya Kenichi pondered. No, that wasn't right. Sasuke's expression looked more like he was waiting for his approval than for him to pay. So, in their daily interactions, Sasuke needed Itachi's permission before buying anything. You wouldn't have guessed Itachi was actually a strict older brother. I have 2,000 ryo more than you. Naruto instantly became happy. He was stunned when he heard about 30,000 ryo before. 30,000 ryo. That's enough to buy so much ramen. He could even eat the most expensive family ramen every day and add a few more pork chops. But luckily it's only 3,000 ryo, even 2,000 ryo less than himself. Sasuke looked at the happy Naruto and smiled. Of course he knew how much his monthly living expenses were. 1 month was equivalent to 6 months of living expenses for the blonde in front of him. But Sasuke always remembered his mother's teachings and didn't show off. Naruto, do you want to learn ninjutsu? Kenichi Amemiya looked at Naruto and asked. Naruto was stunned for a moment after hearing that, and then he looked at Kenichi Amemiya in surprise, his eyes filled with excitement and some trepidation. Can I learn ninjutsu too? Naruto asked tentatively. He looked at Amemiya Kenichi cautiously, fearing that what he had just heard was false. However, Amemiya Kenichi nodded. Learning ninjutsu, even without his own instruction, would be something Naruto would learn once he entered the ninja academy. It wasn't anything special. Of course. Let's start with chakra extraction. Amemiya Kenichi pulled out the textbook he'd been studying, compiled by Orochimaru. The teacher had his own unique understanding of chakra extraction, and this textbook, filled with his own comments, helped beginners quickly master chakra extraction and successfully enter the ninja ranks. This was significantly different from the generic textbooks at ninja academies. Even teachers like Iruka didn't have Orochimaru's deep understanding of chakra extraction, so reading this book would help one get started faster and accelerate their progress. This was the difference between a master teacher and, to a certain extent, the opportunities offered to ninjas after being assigned to a team were different. Ninjas from the Hokage lineage often progressed faster, demonstrating the importance of a teacher. However, as soon as Naruto started training, Kenichi Amemiya noticed something was wrong. There were some issues with Naruto's chakra fluctuations. His training steps were correct, and Kenichi Amemiya also extracted chakra in the same way, but Naruto's expression was a bit painful when he did so. Is it the nine tails? Kenichi Amemiya glanced at Naruto's stomach, where the nine tails was sealed. The nine tails' presence would interfere with Naruto's chakra, causing Naruto to make mistakes easily when performing ninjutsu, which meant that Naruto's training was very difficult. This is probably why Naruto was always at the bottom of the ninja school. It was not until later that he mastered the multiple shadow clone technique by chance. With the guidance of Kakashi and Jiraiya, he became a serious ninja. Chapter 272, the ninja with a strong desire to show off. The nine tails, that's a real nuisance. Kenichi Amemiya looked at Naruto, his face etched with a hint of laughter. The Yondame's original intentions were certainly good. Sealing the nine tails within Naruto would certainly benefit his future. Of course, it's also possible that the Yondame had no other suitable Jinchuriki besides Naruto, so he had no choice. However, the nine tails' existence was currently little more than a burden to Naruto, providing little benefit. It even prevented Naruto from enjoying the privileges he deserved. If Naruto hadn't been the Jinchuriki, then Naruto's identity wouldn't have needed to be kept secret. Well, then, Naruto's identity wouldn't have been so secret. After all, the village called him a demon fox and often bullied him. However, it's also possible this was a counter strategy. After all, Jinchuriki are often very important, and their protection and treatment are usually excellent, so those spies wouldn't have cared about Naruto. Failed to refine? Amemiya Kenichi asked, his chin resting on his hand. Sasuke, standing beside him, looked at Naruto in surprise. This was the first time he'd heard of chakra refining failing. He'd never failed to refine it before, always succeeding on the first try. However, Sasuke, having been taught by his brother and parents, said nothing. Instead, he silently tugged at Amemiya Kenichi's clothes and looked at Naruto. He found the blonde-haired man in front of him quite interesting. Was this the mediocre person his brother was talking about? Well, I felt something similar, but it just failed. Naruto smiled sheepishly, but then regained his composure and declared that he was certain to succeed. Amemiya Kenichi didn't think Naruto wouldn't be able to extract it. After all, even though Naruto would always be at the bottom of the ninja academy, refining chakra would be no problem. Well, I know, and I also know why you failed. Amemiya Kenichi poked Naruto's stomach suggestively. He was actually quite interested in the nine tails. After all, it was truly amazing that such a large creature could be sealed within Naruto's body. However, in the ninja world, sealing techniques seem quite magical, such as the sealing scroll and the fire seal. Kenichi Amemiya once heard his teacher say that sealing techniques are meant to defeat the strong with the weak. Although sealing techniques later became less common in the ninja world, they were not completely absent. In the end, Naruto and Sasuke resolved the situation by resealing Kaguya Satsuki. Of course, this was because Kaguya Satsuki, the ancestor of chakra, could not be destroyed by conventional means, so the only solution was sealing. This also set the stage for a possible sequel. The few remaining foreshadowings at the time were the other Satsuki clan members, but Kishimoto had essentially completed the story of Naruto, and the subsequent Boruto, Naruto Next Generations was a complete rip-off. Big brother, do you know? Naruto leaped up instantly. He had just begun to refine his chakra, and had felt a strange sensation. But being so young, he didn't know how to describe it. I know something. Amemiya Kenichi shrugged. He did know, but the specific solution was a bit puzzling. He wasn't sure if reinforcing the seal with a sealing technique would cause any changes. Looking at the excited Naruto, Amemiya Kenichi was about to say something when he frowned and looked upwards, then shook his head. The Sannin really had nothing to do. He sensed a chakra fluctuation, but the jutsu probably hadn't been completed yet, meaning he hadn't appeared before the Sannin yet. To avoid unnecessary trouble, Amemiya Kenichi decided to leave. So, Amemiya Kenichi retrieved the chakra refining technique he had just given Naruto, and disappeared with Sasuke in front of him. Naruto looked around in confusion, even calling out, but no one responded. Amemiya-san, are we leaving that kid behind? Sasuke asked curiously, tugging on Amemiya Kenichi's clothes. They had already left Naruto's location, and were in a forest. Amemiya Kenichi was rummaging through his belongings, which looked like a mask. His name is Naruto, Sasuke. He's a little younger than you, but he's not a kid, right? Amemiya Kenichi looked at Sasuke with amusement. This little brat Sasuke was really peculiar. The current Sasuke didn't look bitter or resentful at all. He was more like a cold boy who didn't like to talk much. But I'm older than him. Sasuke sometimes had some strange obsessions in some strange places, or was it a historical relic left by Indra and Ashura? Let's go. Didn't I say I'd take you to Konoha to eat tricolor dumplings today? Amemiya Kenichi didn't continue talking. He knew that continuing like this would definitely lead to no results, so it was better not to say anything and divert attention. Sure enough, Sasuke's attention was quickly diverted, and he happily said that he wanted to eat tricolor dumplings. Seeing this, Amemiya Kenichi took out the erasing mask he had made earlier from his pocket. However, looking at Sasuke beside him, Kenichi Amemiya felt somewhat apprehensive. After all, Sasuke was too young to wear a suitable mask, so Kenichi could only create a simple disguise to make Sasuke appear different from his previous appearance. Remember not to let anything slip later, or it'll be very troublesome, Kenichi Amemiya reminded Sasuke. Sasuke nodded obediently. Kenichi Amemiya had disguised Sasuke as a sick brother, bringing him to seek medical treatment. Such cases were not uncommon in Konoha. After all, Konoha had the Konoha Hospital, the largest and best hospital in the Land of Fire, and medical resources were scarce in every world. While the ninjas even had medical ninjas, the problem was that those medical ninjas were often not accessible to ordinary people elsewhere. This led to a frequent influx of people from other parts of the Land of Fire seeking medical treatment in Konoha during peacetime. Konoha, seeking revenue, did not mind these outsiders, as medical care was considered a relatively lucrative industry, especially for medical ninjas. Some illnesses from my past life could be cured in this world with just a few medical ninjutsu, and chakra is regenerative, costing almost nothing. The only problem was the difficulty of training medical ninjutsu, but that was about it now. The ninja world had been relatively peaceful during this period, with no major wars or conflicts, so Konoha's immigration control was relatively relaxed. Kenichi Amemiya, carrying Sasuke on his back, slowly walked towards the main gate of Konoha. Hanging above the gate was a skeleton. Weathered by the wind and sun, it was now nothing but bones, devoid of flesh and blood, but still hung there. A sign above it read, "Traitor to the village, Uchiha Fugaku." A year already? Kenichi Amemiya stared at the skeleton above Konoha, lost in thought. Was this probably Danzo's idea? The Sannin, though somewhat cold, wouldn't do such a thing as hanging someone else's bones. Sensei had said that the Sannin's greatest strength was compromise, and Danzo was certainly capable of such a move. Even Kenichi Amemiya knew the purpose. In his opinion, Danzo's reason for doing this was simple. He wanted to force the other Uchiha clan members to come and seek revenge. This would quickly eliminate those enemies and serve as a deterrent, killing two birds with one stone. Of course, he could also be venting his anger at not being able to obtain the Manjaki Sharingan. Are you surprised? The ninja who registered Kenichi Amemiya smirked, then raised his chin with a haughty air. Kenichi Amemiya quickly put on a face that said, "I'm a country bumpkin, I've never seen the world." He didn't recognize the ninja before him, but he looked like a chunin. Konoha's gates were usually guarded by chunin. Although there was a jonin captain in name only, jonin usually didn't appear, unless it was a special occasion. Most tasks were handled by the Chunin, and since it was a long-term mission, most Chunin enjoyed it. Ninja-sama, what is this? Kenichi Amemiya asked, using his chakra to create a miniature soundproof barrier around Sasuke's ear, to prevent him from hearing. He had Sasuke pretend to be sick, partly for convenience, and partly to prevent Sasuke from seeing the corpse hanging from the gate. Now it seemed like this wasn't excessive preparation. Hey, this guy, you must not know, he's a big shot. He used to look down on us, but now. The Chunin tutted his tongue twice, a look of disdain on his face. It was just like a hyena barking beside a dead lion, triumphantly mocking the dead lion with its companions. Konoha is really powerful. Although Amemiya Kenichi looked down on such bullies, there was no need to start a conflict. He had never met Uchiha Fugaku, and although he knew that he was a hero, he wouldn't start a fight over him. After all, it wasn't like he had acquired some system that allowed him to roar at the sight of injustice. Of course, if you're treating your brother, you're really lucky today. The Chunin continued boasting, and Amemiya Kenichi wasn't surprised. After all, there weren't many people at the gate right now. He was the only one who needed to register. These ninjas, who were just counting ants, naturally didn't miss the opportunity to brag. Amemiya Kenichi didn't mind. In fact, he enjoyed it. After all, they sometimes let slip bits of information. Huh? Is it some important figure? Amemiya Kenichi asked with a playful air of naivete, his face full of ignorance and innocent foolish eyes giving him immense satisfaction. Did you know? Tsunade-sama, one of Konoha's 3 ninjas, practices medicine in Konoha. The Chunin boasted contentedly, then went on to recount the glorious history of the Sannin, a story that almost made Amemiya's ears calloused. He was tired of hearing such stories. But what was interesting was that Amemiya Kenichi noticed that they even mentioned their teacher. Although they didn't say much, they did talk about him. It seems Konoha's attitude towards the teacher is a little strange. Could they be trying to ease these tensions? Amemiya Kenichi thought of a possibility, but for now he still had to wait for the other party to finish showing off. Once he was finally satisfied, Amemiya Kenichi carried Sasuke into Konoha. Sasuke, come down. Entering Konoha made things much easier. No need for disguises. After all, Konoha wouldn't be so idle as to have ninjas tracking him at any moment. Sasuke didn't notice his old father hanging over his head, but instead looked around curiously. Seeing this, Amemiya Kenichi took Sasuke to buy 3 colored dumplings. Although Amemiya Kenichi also wanted to see if showing Sasuke his father's body would stimulate him to open his eyes, he decided not to because that might attract Konoha's attention. He came here to relax today, not to cause trouble. But if Tsunade is here, that would be troublesome. Amemiya Kenichi glanced at the location of the Konoha hospital. Tsunade actually returned to Konoha. This was truly strange. Could it be that Tsunade's hemophobia had resolved itself, prompting her to return and fulfill her lover and brother's dreams? If so, Danzo would likely be in for a headache. After all, before this, Danzo had been a strong contender for the next Hokage of Konoha. But now, with Tsunade, his advantage was diminished, practically non-existent. Tsunade, one of Konoha's 3 ninjas and the granddaughter of the Shodaime, possessed immense status and experience. Furthermore, the prestige she had garnered during the previous war was unmatched by Danzo. Amemiya Kenichi considered testing the waters, but considering his purpose for coming today and Sasuke's presence, he abandoned the idea. Forget it, he'd go back when he had time. Old man, there's something wrong with you. Tsunade frowned, examining the film in her hand. She had never seen such a strange case before. The only thing she knew for sure was that her master, the Sandaime Sarutobi Hiruzen, was ill. She didn't know the specifics yet, and further testing was needed to determine the cause. What's the problem? Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at Tsunade's expression and felt a little nervous. After all, this was Tsunade. If she said she had a problem. Chapter 273 Smoking is harmful to your health, old man. How should I put it? There are some abnormal growths on your body. Look, here in your lungs. Tsunade pointed at the film in his hand and said to his teacher. Sarutobi Hiruzen leaned over to take a look, but soon found that he could not really understand it. After all, these things were too technical. However, at the place where Tsunade pointed, he could see some small shadows. Sarutobi Hiruzen was a little confused. To be honest, Sarutobi Hiruzen had tried to dissect enemy ninjas himself. After all, doing so would help ninjas learn how to kill their enemies efficiently. But to be honest, his research on organs was not that profound. For Sarutobi Hiruzen, as long as he could kill his enemies efficiently, it was enough for a ninja. Moreover, medical ninjas were originally a branch that appeared later. At the beginning, Konoha did not pay much attention to them. Later, they tried to promote it and found that it could effectively reduce the mortality rate, which is why it began to be widely popularized. So, is there something wrong? Sarutobi Hiruzen asked doubtfully. Honestly, he didn't think there was anything wrong with his lungs. He still smoked for long stretches every day, though he coughed occasionally, but that was just the nature of smoking. Especially after Biwako's death, Sarutobi Hiruzen felt lonely at home every day, an indescribable loneliness, so naturally, he smoked even more. A cough? He didn't care, a few coughs wouldn't kill him. After all, normal bodies don't have those things. Tsunade glanced at her teacher. It seemed her teacher truly didn't grasp the seriousness of the problem. A sudden increase or decrease in a normal person's body is usually a serious, potentially fatal illness. She hadn't originally planned to return to Konoha, even though Orochimaru had helped cure her hemophobia and had made her realize that avoiding problems wouldn't solve them. But when Tsunade thought of Konoha, the place where her lover and brother had died, she felt an inexplicable unease within her, a restlessness difficult to articulate. Therefore, she personally resented Konoha. However, after hearing the news of the Uchiha clan's rebellion, Tsunade, despite accumulating countless debts from gambling dens, decided to return to Konoha. The main reason was her concern for the clan members who had assimilated into the larger Konoha community. The Senju clan, for example, had originally integrated into the Konoha population, following Hashirama's grandfather's wishes. This was the reason so many civilian ninjas emerged in Konoha. By integrating, the Senju clan inherited their talents. Otherwise, the number of ninjas emerging in Konoha would have been much lower. While this decision certainly led to the Senju clan's demise, it also successfully bound them to Konoha. Konoha's survival was inevitable. Now that the Uchiha clan had rebelled, Tsunade was concerned about the members who had integrated into Konoha, fearing they would perish in the war. This, combined with other factors, led her back to Konoha. Of course, the high gambling debts and debt collectors also played a role in Tsunade's return. But I don't feel any discomfort. Sarutobi Hiruzen naturally picked up his pipe and was about to take a puff, but upon seeing Tsunade's unfriendly glare, he silently put it down. Smoking is prohibited in Konoha Hospital. This was Tsunade's old rule. Originally, this rule was practically non-existent in Tsunade's absence, especially since Sarutobi Hiruzen would smoke as much as he pleased, and even the director of Konoha Hospital would light a cigarette for him if he saw him. But now that Tsunade has returned to Konoha, this rule has become much more enforced, at least not one that most people dare to violate. Even Sarutobi Hiruzen, upon seeing his disciple Tsunade's unfriendly glare, would obediently put down his pipe. He had no desire to test Tsunade's uncanny strength. Smoking is harmful to your health, old man. Tsunade took a deep breath, barely suppressing her anger. But seeing Sarutobi Hiruzen's indifference, she decided to give him another warning. Although I don't know what this means, I suggest you be careful, old man, and don't end up dying in your bed, Tsunade said grumpily. In her opinion, the substance in Sarutobi Hiruzen's lungs was more or less related to his smoking. Tsunade returned to Konoha to examine several jonin, as a way of assessing whether Konoha's medical standards had declined, but only Sarutobi Hiruzen's lungs were found to contain such a mysterious substance. Furthermore, the narrow tissue extraction technique couldn't resolve it, proving that the substance must have grown naturally within the teacher's body, thus not being recognized as harmful foreign tissue by the ninjutsu. Can the narrow tissue extraction technique resolve it? Sarutobi Hiruzen was, after all, a ninja professor. He knew a great deal about ninjutsu and understood that common ailments were often addressed with the narrow tissue extraction technique, which was why minor illnesses like colds were easily treated. A single narrow tissue extraction technique could often resolve these issues, and common poisonings like food poisoning were not a problem for the ninjutsu. No, these things must have grown naturally within your body, so they can't be detected by the ninjutsu. Tsunade shook her head. She had tried before, but it just didn't work. These strange substances were very effective against the narrow tissue extraction technique. As Tsunade spoke, she glanced at her teacher. She had naturally seen what he was doing, the telescope technique, and over there was a yellow-haired kid. "Old man, who was that child you were looking at just now?" Tsunade asked, frowning. She had some guesses. After all, she had met Orochimaru before, and he had told her about some of Konoha's past events. Of all the children, the only one who could have received such attention from the illustrious Sannin was a Jinchuriki. The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, Uzumaki Naruto. Sarutobi Hiruzen smacked his lips, glanced at his pipe with some regret, but still answered his student's question. He knew his student was no fool, he couldn't hide it, so he might as well speak directly. Tsunade understood, it was indeed the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. "Do you know that, if Jiraiya knew about this, he would probably never forgive you for the rest of his life?" Tsunade sat down in her chair and placed the film on the table. Silence fell in the office. It was a while later that Tsunade heard the teacher's reply. "This is all for the village." Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyes were a little obscure, and his tone was mixed with some guilt, but he had no intention of improving Naruto's current living conditions. The worse Naruto's life was, the less likely he would be suspected, and to be a backup, he also arranged for the ANBU to protect Naruto to ensure that nothing could go wrong. He knew the relationship between Jiraiya and the fourth Hokage, but Jiraiya was not in Konoha, wasn't he? It was unknown when he would come back. It stands to reason that those who didn't go back for such a long time could definitely be classified as rebels, but Jiraiya and Tsunade were special cases, and Sarutobi Hiruzen naturally couldn't let these two disciples leave Konoha completely. As long as the three ninjas were still there, even in name only, they could be counted as Konoha's strength on paper. Tsunade was disappointed. Orochimaru was right. Konoha had become a decayed place, a place that even Orochimaru found disgusting. The old man had spoken of the will of fire his whole life, yet the orphan of the fourth Hokage was reduced to a miserable existence, fishing in the wilderness. This wasn't just a casual remark about Naruto fishing for fun. Tsunade had been back in Konoha for a few days, and she had witnessed how the villagers and ninja had isolated Naruto, even some things she'd described as disgusting. What would Jiraiya do if he knew about this? Minato Namikaze was his disciple, after all. Even the child named Uzumaki Naruto was named after him. Tsunade had also read Jiraiya's book, The Legend of the Strong and Perseverant Ninja. Tsunade suddenly felt exhausted, even feeling that staying in Konoha was torture. She felt that Jiraiya's absence had been the right decision. If he knew, things would become even more complicated. "Is this the will of fire?" Tsunade asked sarcastically, then left immediately. The third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, sat in Tsunade's office, silently staring at the curtains. Though thick, the sun still shone through them. Facing the glare, the third Hokage squinted. "Brother Amemiya, what is the will of fire?" Seeing Sasuke's clear eyes, Amemiya Kenichi scratched his head. He was a bit unsure how to answer the question, but there was no other way. After all, the current Konoha ninjas, especially the civilians, love to repeat the third Hokage's frequent words. "Where the leaves dance, the fire lives on." The flames will continue to illuminate the village and cause new leaves to sprout. As if to demonstrate their deep love for the village, they couldn't do otherwise. The third Hokage was a masterful speaker, and the will of fire had stirred quite a few people. Amemiya Kenichi felt that in such a situation, even if these ninjas were asked to die, they would do it. Simply put, the sacrifice of the fallen ninja wasn't in vain. Amemiya Kenichi explained briefly. This whole thing could easily be broken down into a 4,000-word essay, but he didn't want to elaborate. After all, a slogan wouldn't inspire anyone, nor was it necessary to understand it. Another meaning is to inspire young ninja to become excellent ninja, and then work hard to bring forth the next generation of leaves for the village. A familiar voice made Amemiya Kenichi stiffen. Couldn't this be such bad luck? But Amemiya Kenichi immediately turned with a puzzled expression, only to see a woman standing not far behind him. It was Tsunade. Tsunade's beauty was instantly recognizable, and her striking figure was the most recognizable feature. She was even a perennial fixture in the Naruto anime, appearing in numerous titles year after year. However, Amemiya Kenichi didn't want to run into Tsunade here. After all, he had come in stealthily, and while he hadn't intended to cause any trouble, it would still be troublesome if she discovered him. Oh. Sasuke nodded, but he still didn't quite understand. After all, this topic was a bit difficult for a child his age to grasp. Excuse me, who are you? Amemiya Kenichi feigned bewilderment as he looked at Tsunade. His character was that of a country bumpkin seeking medical treatment, so it was understandable that he didn't recognize Tsunade. Not anyone, just, Tsunade had only replied casually, but looking at the two people before her, she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Amemiya Kenichi's expression remained unchanged, but inside, a sense of nervousness grew. Could it be that Tsunade wouldn't be able to detect his face disappearing technique? The teacher had also said that this ninjutsu was highly camouflaged, making it difficult to detect anything amiss. It was a ninjutsu specifically developed by the teacher. While it had no combat effect, it could be very useful in other areas. What's wrong, ninja-sama? Amemiya Kenichi looked at Tsunade with fear and trepidation. He was very good at portraying the fear that ordinary people would feel towards ninjas. After all, he had seen many such people before him. So, he had some experience in acting it out. It's okay. Tsunade waved her hand, believing it was probably an illusion. Upon hearing this, Amemiya Kenichi smiled flatteringly and left with Sasuke. Sasuke politely said goodbye to Tsunade, which made Tsunade's smile grow even wider. After all, she still loved being addressed as younger, even though she was already quite old. But why do I feel so familiar? Tsunade looked at Amemiya Kenichi's back. She felt as if she knew the man before her, but she couldn't put her finger on why. As Amemiya Kenichi dragged Sasuke down another street, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. He had been terrified just now. He didn't know why Tsunade had come, and he hadn't even gone to the Konoha hospital. If Tsunade found out, it would be a horrible experience. A trip to Konoha would turn into a desperate escape. And it might even be hellish. The thought of facing the third demon Sarutobi Hiruzen and the future fifth demon Tsunade in Konoha made Amemiya Kenichi's scalp tingle, but thankfully, Tsunade didn't notice anything amiss. Yes, this is a smoking cessation novel. Chapter 274, Danzo, as long as I live long enough, I will be the Hokage sooner or later. Kenichi Amemiya took Sasuke on a foodie spree through Konoha. Sasuke had a lot to eat, but his appetite wasn't great. After a few snacks, he was full, contentedly rubbing his belly. Afterward, they stayed at an inn in Konoha. Kenichi Amemiya had plenty of money, so he didn't have to worry about rent. 4 days of these relaxing days passed quickly, and it was time for Kenichi Amemiya to leave. While Konoha was a good place, he couldn't stay openly there just yet. Kenichi Amemiya had spent the past few days pondering how to improve genetic programming, and now that he had some ideas, it was time to return. Brother Amemiya, are we leaving today? Sasuke asked reluctantly, munching on a tree-colored meatball. Kenichi Amemiya looked at Sasuke with a smile, curious about what kind of person Sasuke would become after he had changed the ninja world so much. Would he be the bitter and vengeful character he'd always been, or something else? But it was time to leave, and Kenichi Amemiya was about to talk to Sasuke. With a bang, Kenichi Amemiya instinctively turned around and saw a ball of flames rising into the sky in the direction of Konoha's main gate, blazing fiercely. Immediately, many ninjas rushed out from the side and quickly ran towards the gate. Meanwhile, other civilians nervously gathered their belongings, fearing something might happen. What's going on? Why are all these terrible things happening as soon as I arrive? Kenichi Amemiya was speechless. He had just been thinking about taking Sasuke away from Konoha and returning to the land of rice, but he hadn't expected to encounter such an unexpected situation now. Sasuke was a little scared, but he still clung to Kenichi Amemiya's clothes and stood there, curiously looking towards the gate. But the commotion soon died down. Kenichi Amemiya scratched his head, thinking it was probably a minor incident, nothing serious to worry about. If it was a strong person, he would definitely not be taken down so quickly. So, as Kenichi Amemiya paid his room and prepared to leave Konoha, he overheard Sasuke tell him there were many people outside. Kenichi Amemiya didn't pay much attention. Curious, Sasuke squeezed to the front of the crowd and watched the figure slowly approaching from the street. As soon as he paid and reached the hotel, Kenichi Amemiya spotted someone on the street, a woman. Her broad chest and face betrayed her identity, as did the enthusiastic cheers of the others. It was Tsunade. Tsunade walked solemnly down the street, surrounded by the enthusiastic Konoha villagers and some serious looking ninja. But Tsunade's appearance wasn't the main point, it was the woman accompanying her. With her long black hair, black eyes, and a face resembling both Itachi Uchiha and Sasuke Uchiha, Kenichi Amemiya recognized her despite her age, worn clothing, and the scars of battle. It was Uchiha Mikoto. When Kenichi Amemiya saw the other person, he instinctively wanted to find Sasuke and cover his eyes. After all, he recognized Uchiha Mikoto, so there was no way Sasuke wouldn't recognize her if Sasuke saw her. But when Kenichi Amemiya entered to pay, little Sasuke was watching. The moment he saw Uchiha Mikoto, Sasuke instantly became excited, shouting "Mom!" and jumping out. Kenichi Amemiya took a deep breath. The mom was drowned out by the crowd's enthusiastic shouts, but it was clear that ninjas were not ordinary characters. Almost instantly, Tsunade and several masked ANBU ninjas looked towards Sasuke's position, and Uchiha Mikoto also looked over in surprise. "Mom!" Sasuke pushed through the crowd and ran out, catching the eyes of Tsunade and the ANBU ninjas. Uchiha Mikoto looked at her son in surprise, but then her expression changed to confusion and she looked around, as if searching for the child's mother. "Is this your mother?" Tsunade crouched before Sasuke and pointed at Uchiha Mikoto behind her. The ninjas behind her paused. Uchiha Mikoto looked at Sasuke in confusion, but her eyes were tinged with pleading, hoping her precious son would notice something was amiss and deny it. "Yes, it's my mother." But how could little Sasuke understand such things? He smiled happily, remembering this older sister before him saying something profound and wise. Although he couldn't understand it, it was certainly powerful. So little Sasuke simply admitted it. The enthusiastic crowd was stunned for a moment, then a clamor of discussion. Uchiha Mikoto watched the scene in despair. She knew her son, Sasuke, would be trapped in Konoha, like herself, a tool to lure the other clan members. Tsunade's expression was complicated. She remembered this brat before her. He had previously asked about the Will of Fire, but now it seemed that this was Uchiha Mikoto's son, and the youngest son at that, Uchiha Sasuke. But then Tsunade realized something. If this person was Sasuke, then who was next to him at the time? "Sasuke, don't act on your own anymore." A man walked out, grinning. He raised his hand and punched Sasuke on the head. The force wasn't strong, but it was strong enough that Sasuke instantly crouched on the ground, rubbing his head in pain. He also gave Uchiha Mikoto a cold look. "Since you've decided to come to Konoha, why do you want to be captured alive? Why not just die?" The man looked at Uchiha Mikoto with a tone of disgust and resentment. Uchiha Mikoto lowered her head. She had prepared herself for death, but Tsunade's appearance had caught her off guard. She hadn't realized Tsunade had returned to Konoha. Suicide wasn't easy for someone of her caliber, especially a medical ninja. "Your Excellency seems very confident." Tsunade looked at the man before her. He was still smiling, but the fear he'd worn was gone. He now looked as if he didn't care. "This face is fake." "Since it's fake, I guess so." Kenichi Amemiya tore off the mask on his face. "Since the situation is irreversible, there is no need to continue pretending." Seeing Kenichi Amemiya's face, Tsunade's pupils shrank, and she subconsciously stood in front of Uchiha Mikoto. The ANBU ninjas next to her also formed a battle formation. They also recognized the guy in front of them, Konoha's S-rank rebel ninja, Kenichi Amemiya. "Tsunade-sama, you welcome me like this after so many days." Kenichi Amemiya smiled brightly, then opened his arms with a kind look on his face. The Konoha villagers and ninjas nearby also realized that something was wrong. Ordinary people began to try to escape, while those ninjas gritted their teeth and stood in front of ordinary people. Where Konoha dances, the fire will also continue. They may be the true practitioners of the Will of Fire. "Kenichi Amemiya, how dare you come to Konoha?" An ANBU ninja glared at Kenichi Amemiya angrily. If it weren't for Tsunade standing before them, they would have attacked long ago. Any traitorous ninja deserved severe punishment. You are not allowed to attack, Tsunade said solemnly. She had only fought Kenichi Amemiya once, but she knew the brat before her was not as weak as she had imagined. In fact, his strength far surpassed that of an ordinary jonin. Moreover, he dared to appear before her like this, probably because he had nothing to fear. How about we make a deal, Tsunade-sama? Kenichi Amemiya chuckled and snapped his fingers. The next second, smoke rose from the surrounding area, followed by green flames, blocking the ordinary people on the street from leaving. What are you going to do? Tsunade watched in shock and anger. How could she not know what Kenichi Amemiya was talking about? This guy was indeed like his teacher, almost a madman. He actually used the lives of so many ordinary people as payment for a deal. Tsunade was puzzled, however. While the flames looked troublesome, if they could handle the strange black flames, did Amemiya Kenichi truly believe they could force Konoha's hand with them? Of course, take Uchiha Sasuke, Uchiha Mikoto, and Uchiha Fugaku's remains, Amemiya Kenichi said naturally. He could sense ninjas nearby putting out the fires, but that wasn't what he had been planning. The moment he saw Uchiha Mikoto, Amemiya Kenichi's mind was to avoid trouble. After all, he didn't want to deal with such a complicated matter, and the risks were high, not to mention that he and Mikoto weren't close. But after Sasuke escaped, Amemiya Kenichi knew the situation was getting complicated. After comprehensively weighing the risks and rewards of saving Uchiha Mikoto, Uchiha Sasuke, and taking Uchiha Fugaku's remains, he decided to take action. While there were risks, success would significantly elevate his reputation within the Uchiha clan. To use an old school game, the Uchiha clan's reputation would instantly reach revered, while Uchiha Itachi and Sasuke's would reach admired. Do you think it's possible? Amemiya Kenichi? Tsunade stared at him, her fists clenched. This was Konoha, and this little disturbance would surely attract the attention of the old Sandaime. Then, Amemiya Kenichi lifted Sasuke in his hand, and glanced at Uchiha Mikoto. There were more than one way to achieve his goal. The simplest was sheer force, but to force Konoha, and the Sandaime, to submit through sheer force would require a display of power comparable to Nagato's. A single Super Shinra Tensei swept across Konoha, instantly crippling the vast majority of its forces. The second option, naturally, was to use force or some other means, to force Konoha to agree to his terms. Amemiya Kenichi felt this method was somewhat feasible. Furthermore, based on his understanding of the Sandaime, he knew he would certainly compromise if the threat was strong enough. After all, he was known for his ability to compromise. As for the third option, Amemiya Kenichi could suddenly master would release, using a single move, the Senjutsu True Thousand Hands, to force the Sandaime to abdicate on the spot, becoming the fifth Hokage himself, and then announcing a pardon for the Uchiha clan. Of course, this possibility was extremely small. It's not impossible, Amemiya Kenichi said, grinning at Tsunade. You're saying that, if I'll let you, and the two Uchiha go now, you can complete that research faster? Danzo looked at Amemiya Kenichi, his expression slightly grim. Danzo couldn't hide Konoha's affairs from Danzo, especially since this incident had become so serious. Danzo immediately dispatched the route to investigate and see if he could create some kind of situation to discredit his old rival and Tsunade. But he was unexpectedly stopped by Kenichi Amemiya, or rather, Kenichi's shadow clone. Yes, I'm sure Danzo-sama is familiar with my eyes, right? Kenichi Amemiya's shadow clone opened its 3 Magatama Sharingan, then closed it again, making Danzo's eyes tingle with envy. He truly desired those eyes. But this was such a big deal, it was clearly not something he could decide alone. Don't worry, the Sandaime Hokage has a companion trying to convince him, Kenichi Amemiya's shadow clone explained with a smile, noticing Danzo's hesitation. Danzo fell silent at this. If Sarutobi agrees, then I can agree too, but only if you're the first person to receive the eye transplant. Danzo hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. Of course it's you, Goddamn Hokage-sama. Kenichi Amemiya's shadow clone understood Danzo's intention, and Danzo felt a surge of joy upon hearing this. After all, he'd even prepared a Hokage cape in preparation for the Hokage position. Of course, the first one he made was the cloak and hat of the fourth Hokage. Later, when Minato Namikaze came to power, he had to change it to the 5th Hokage. As a result, Minato Namikaze died, and he was so happy that he almost jumped up. Who knew that the 3rd Hokage would come back again? But Danzo still had some expectations. Until Tsunade returned to the village some time ago, Danzo injured for a long time, and after weighing the strength, he quietly changed the cloak to the 6th Hokage. But if he could get some Uchiha, I'm not a Hokage. Danzo snorted coldly. Amemiya Kenichi's shadow clone couldn't help but complain in his heart. This old man, who in the Konoha level doesn't know what you, Danzo, are thinking? Who are you trying to fool? Chapter 275 Pure Ninja. Are you trying to threaten me with this? Things weren't going smoothly for the Sandaime. Looking at the Sandaime, whose expression remained unchanged, Amemiya Kenichi admitted to feeling a bit overwhelmed. After all, the Sandaime was different from Danzo, and there was no other way to force him into agreeing to his terms. Furthermore, as the Hokage of Konoha, Sarutobi Hiruzen might approach matters differently than others, so there were many things to consider. As for persuasion, Amemiya Kenichi's shadow clone used the same method, the lure of the Sharingan. However, considering the Sandaime's status and personality, Amemiya Kenichi also mentioned that, if he didn't agree, some unpleasant rumors might circulate within Konoha. For example, the Uchiha clan rebelled against the village because the village leaders were using members of the Uchiha clan to make deals with Orochimaru in order to research the Sharingan. No, it's just a small reminder, Amemiya Kenichi's shadow clone said politely, smiling at the Sandaime. In Konoha, once the 3rd Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, was convinced most of the issues were resolved. Danzo's side shouldn't be a major problem. After all, as long as there was sufficient benefit, Danzo wouldn't say anything. He was the type who wouldn't do anything without a profit. Sarutobi Hiruzen smoked a cigarette as he looked at Amemiya Kenichi. He had already said he was a shadow clone, meaning he couldn't stop him even if he tried. Furthermore, his request didn't seem like a big deal to Sarutobi Hiruzen. While Uchiha Fugaku's betrayal with his clan had infuriated Sarutobi Hiruzen, that had been a year ago. For a while now, Sarutobi Hiruzen had felt quite at ease. The demise of the Uchiha clan had given him more time to focus on other matters. The Uchiha clan's demise had also intimidated many other clans. His teacher had once said that being Hokage meant being aware of potential threats within the village and maintaining vigilance. Now, the village was peaceful and harmonious. After the beasts had nearly devoured Uchiha Fugaku's remains, he had originally intended to let them go. After all, the insult was already obvious, and leaving it hanging there would also damage the village's image. But old Danzo insisted that this was the only way to demonstrate Konoha's wrath, something that those scoundrels couldn't test, so he left it hanging. Sarutobi Hiruzen hadn't hoped to use Uchiha Fugaku's remains to lure the remaining Uchiha clan members. Konoha was a powerful clan, and they weren't afraid of retaliation from those creatures. It would be better to rest and recuperate, allowing the village to develop peacefully for a while. As for Uchiha Mikoto, she was just a woman without a husband. Releasing her wouldn't have any impact, but simply letting her go wouldn't work. Konoha needed to maintain its reputation, and these benefits didn't quite satisfy the Sandaime. This is a traitor to the Uchiha clan. Do you know the damage they've done to Konoha and its villagers? How many innocent children have lost their parents? Sarutobi Hiruzen didn't mention anything else, but instead began to reminisce about events from a year ago. The corners of Amemiya Kenichi's mouth twitched. Sarutobi Hiruzen understood what he was saying. I can promise that when the research results are out, you'll be the first recipient of the transplant. Amemiya Kenichi's shadow clone offered a long-prepared offer. Is that what I want? Look. How many families in Konoha have been torn apart? How many people have lost their loved ones, all because of those Uchiha? The Sandaime slammed the table in anger, as if his dignity had been insulted. Amemiya Kenichi took a deep breath. It seemed he wasn't satisfied with the price, but since he'd started bargaining, it meant there was still room for negotiation. If he didn't, there would be no room for negotiation. Then, Amemiya Kenichi's shadow clone began a tug-of-war. What's wrong with this old man? Tsunade frowned, staring into the distance. The Sandaime hadn't arrived yet. This didn't make sense. The Hokage building was supposedly located at the heart of Konoha, allowing it to reach anywhere at the fastest possible speed. This was the original design concept for the Hokage building, so the Sandaime must have seen it. But since they hadn't arrived yet, the Sandaime must have been held back by someone, and someone related to Kenichi Amemiya could have held him back. Orochimaru's here too? What are you master and disciple planning to do? Tsunade demanded, looking at Kenichi Amemiya. She wanted to attack, but the civilians nearby, who hadn't yet been evacuated, held back for now. Guess. Kenichi Amemiya wasn't anxious. Instead, he folded his hands and watched the nearby ninja evacuate the civilians. As long as the shadow clones had reached an agreement, there would be no need for a fight. If not, the presence of these civilians would at most deter them from taking any action. Neither Tsunade nor the Sandaime were the type to show mercy in an emergency. When ruthless action was needed, the civilians who were accidentally killed would simply become victims of Kenichi Amemiya's attack on Konoha. Tsunade's expression was grim. Soon, the surrounding civilians were evacuated, leaving only Kenichi Amemiya and Sasuke, the opposing Konoha ANBU, and a guilt-ridden Uchiha Mikoto. Just as the situation grew increasingly tense, and the Konoha ANBU were about to make a move, Amemiya Kenichi suddenly smiled. Sister Tsunade, see you next time, Amemiya Kenichi said, beaming. He had just received the memories transmitted from his shadow clone's dissolution. The Sandaime Sarutobi Hiruzen had agreed to his terms, offering certain conditions in exchange for Uchiha Mikoto, Sasuke, and Fugaku leaving Konoha. This made perfect sense. After all, those conditions offered tangible benefits to Konoha. However, forcing him and Sasuke to stay would come at a high cost. Sarutobi Hiruzen could make a quick decision simply by comparing the benefits against the risks. Tsunade was confused, but soon she saw several ANBU running over and relaying the Sandaime's instructions to the others. The ANBU following him exchanged glances, then glanced at her, then lowered their heads and let go of Uchiha Mikoto. Tsunade watched with a dazed look, but she quickly realized what was happening. After all, Tsunade was a woman of considerable political savvy. She would become the 5th Hokage and govern the village well, even suppressing the restless Danzo. This showed her extraordinary abilities. She quickly grasped the current situation and understood why Amemiya Kenichi was so confident. This guy must have made some kind of deal with the old man, no, even with Danzo, to the point where no ninja had come to her aid until now. Not even the Konoha ANBU had come. This amused and infuriated Tsunade, even feeling a bit pathetic. When had Konoha become like this? A traitorous ninja appeared in her own village, and not only was he safe, but he could actually leave. But just as she was thinking this, explosions erupted from both sides of Konoha, flames erupted, and then Tsunade saw someone fighting over there. Ah, it looks like the teacher is dealing with the Sandaime-sama and Danzo-sama, Amemiya Kenichi said with a look of worry, but his tone was distinctly teasing, and Tsunade picked up on it, taking a deep breath. These guys. Amemiya Kenichi smiled at Tsunade's expression. This was what he had discussed with the Sandaime. While he could take Uchiha Mikoto and Fugaku's remains and leave, he couldn't just leave like that. He needed to give some explanation, something that would save Konoha's reputation. And so the show began. The Sandaime Sarutobi Hiruzen was held back by his traitor, Orochimaru, and with others attacking the village, it made sense that he couldn't take action. Amemiya Kenichi took Uchiha Mikoto with him, and, smiling, prepared to leave Konoha. There are always many ways to achieve one's goals. This time, Amemiya Kenichi simply chose a relatively easy and labor-saving approach. Amemiya, do you find this method of achieving your goals amusing? Just as he was about to leave, Amemiya Kenichi heard Tsunade's voice, laced with suppressed anger. Frowning, he turned away, then simultaneously told Uchiha Mikoto to take Sasuke and leave Konoha. Uchiha Mikoto glanced at him, but remained silent, quickly leaving with Sasuke. She knew she would only be a burden if she stayed, so it would be better to leave immediately, freeing Amemiya Kenichi's hands. What do you mean by that, Tsunade's sister? Amemiya Kenichi looked at Tsunade. The biggest variable in his improvised plan was Tsunade. After all, Tsunade was a far more pure ninja, unlike Danzo and Sarutobi Hiruzen. Amemiya Kenichi hated these pure ninjas the most. After all, Their solution to problems was always a fight. The winners' arguments were justified, while the losers were not, and they couldn't convince others of their ninja way. Unfortunately, most powerful individuals possess this potential. It's only the Sandaime Sarutobi Hiruzen who's now older and more thoughtful. Otherwise, if the Sandaime were a pure ninja, his teacher wouldn't have looked down on him so much. I mean, when did you become a politician like that old man? Tsunade roared, and the next second, she vanished from sight. Amemiya Kenichi's pupils shrank as he felt the wind behind him. With a sudden stomp of his foot, he leaped onto the rooftop. Before he could turn, he felt another deadly threat bearing down on him. He had no choice but to dodge Tsunade's attack once more, but at the same moment, he heard a loud boom. Flying brick fragments ripped through Amemiya Kenichi's clothes, like sharp blades, slicing through them. Furious, Tsunade displayed the fighting prowess of one of the ninja world's most powerful. Her incredible speed and strength made her appear incredibly violent. Even as a woman, no one dared to ignore her presence. Kenichi Amemiya even wondered who would win in a fight between the Raikage and Tsunade. He took a deep breath and instantly entered Sage mode. Facing Tsunade, he felt immense pressure. It would be difficult to deal with her without Sage mode. At that moment, Kenichi Amemiya turned and saw Tsunade throwing a punch. Her furious eyes and annoyed expression confirmed that the Sannin before him was in a bad mood. Kenichi Amemiya felt a sense of helplessness. He wasn't a politician like the Sandaime. He had chosen this solution because it was the only way to ensure Sasuke and Mikoto's safe escape. Otherwise, if Tsunade held him back, how would Mikoto protect Sasuke with the Sandaime and Danzo? Would she resort to cheating? This wasn't the world of Saint Seiya, where a sudden burst of Cosmo could defeat a powerful enemy. In Naruto, ninjas' combat power often developed gradually, barring exceptional cases like the Uchiha clan's eye-opening. However, according to Kenichi Amemiya's research on the Uchiha clan, Mikoto Uchiha is unlikely to activate her Manjiki unless she was provoked by the tragic death of her son Sasuke. Even if she did, it wouldn't be very effective against the Sandaime. Uchiha Fugaku possessed a Manjiki, yet he was still defeated. From this perspective, the Sandaime's combat prowess is actually quite strong, though he's now more accustomed to thinking like a politician. Kenichi Amemiya doesn't believe Mikoto Uchiha now possesses the Manjiki Sharingan. She definitely isn't, otherwise he would have seen the conspicuous Susanoo during the commotion at the Konoha gate. Of course, even if Mikoto Uchiha could activate Susanoo, it would be useless against Tsunade, who could crush it with brute force. Watching Tsunade charging at him, Kenichi Amemiya took a deep breath, and a raging flame erupted from his mouth, while something flashed in his hand. What appeared before Tsunade was a flame mingled with green, emitting an extremely high temperature. The smoke even produced made her frown subconsciously. Having previously battled Tsunagakure and Hanzo, Tsunade instantly recognized that something was amiss with the smoke. You little bastard, you actually put poison in your jutsu? Tsunade's face darkened. This little bastard was as cruel and ruthless as ever. He actually put poison in his fire jutsu. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.